Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Boom! Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live in a deep rain delay from my studio / RV dining room located directly inside America. Anyhow, folks of the interwebs, once again, JJ Vance here, host of Operation GCD. Oop, right there. And perhaps more notably, not the vice president. So thanks for joining me here tonight, folks. I will be your pilot and navigator for tonight's shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And not going to lie to you, folks of the interwebs, got a real barn burner on deck for y'all tonight. An occult and or esoteric review of the 1981 film Ghost Story. And if you folks of the interwebs were like me and had not heard of this film, you know, it is an interesting watch, and hopefully you'll reach that conclusion yourself after we discuss tonight's review. But it was the inspiration of tonight's guest that spawned this review, because once again, I had not heard of this film, but tonight's guest, Jon Mitchell, one of tonight's guests, Jon Mitchell, in his blog over on Substack, is highlighting a lot of these matters relative to the Son of Sam, and this particular one out of Peter Straub books, that is, the author of this story that was later adapted into a film. But this particular one, Ghost Story, I find interesting because it was written contemporaneously to the Son of Sam events in New York City back in, well, the arrest of Berkowitz in 77. And Straub writes this book in 78 and it's published in January of 79. And seems like Peter Straub was in the know in a lot of these cult details in around that whole Son of Sam process situation. And John's a great researcher into these matters relative to Yonkers cult activities in and around New York City, specifically Westchester County, New York, the place I like to call a den of iniquity. But thanks for joining us here tonight to get a little GCD, folks, and welcome our guests, Jon Mitchell and Julia from Cosmic Peach. How y'all doing? Welcome to Operation GCD. Welcome back. Not your first time, is it, Julia? John, greetings, sir. Always great to have you back as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks for having me, JJ. I'm excited about this one.
For sure. Me too. Horror films are not my, not my favorite genre, but this one, given the esoteric understandings of a lot of the things, and just a lot of the elements of the story, I found very interesting. So, and I had never heard of this film. So, and we actually had two other parties joining us tonight. We had Davey Wavy and Nick, host of the Occult Rejects. However, much like the characters in tonight's film, who just seemingly, fall off and die throughout the storyline of tonight's discussion in the film plotline. Nick and Davey Wavy didn't die, but I'm saying they've fallen off tonight's panel due to other reasons, weather and other matters, personal matters. Nonetheless, we continue with our review, and I don't know if I have a lot of occult stuff. I mean, I definitely saw a lot of esoteric stuff in the film. And what were your thoughts, John? Overall, I know you've written an extensive blog piece on Straub's work, but you highlighted a lot of very salient characteristics, I think, of the Son of Sam cult, right, in your blog piece relative to the ghost story plotline, right?
Yeah. There's an awful lot of stuff, especially in the novel, but some of it survives in the movie too. Really, really conscious references to the Yonkers cult, and it's sort of like it's a version of the story that never mentions Son of Sam directly, but it references all the other players and locations except for Son of Sam itself. So it's odd the way he did it, but it was ingenious for the book. It's a really interesting story structure.
Yeah, I agree for sure. I got some ideas on some other things that I saw, perhaps that more anointed thoughts, I suppose, if anything else. But before we get into those discussions, and before we discuss your blog posts, again, I thank you all both for joining me here. And if I can offer you both your time to plug anything you're working on or an introduction to anything you're working on, please, John, start us off there.
Sure. Yeah.
I know you got some new blog stuff, but as far as, and I'll have the links here in the show notes, but if you want to introduce some of your work, and then Julia, of course, we'll let you do that next, and then we'll get in our discussion.
Okay. Well, I'm
not cutting out.
Well, I wrote a long essay or a short booklet, I guess, or a pamphlet, depending on how which classification you prefer, called Before Son of Sam. And in the Substack blog, I'm just elaborating on some of the points that I originally made in the booklet, and occasionally, you run across new information that relates to things that you've already discussed. So, I had been thinking about the death mask murder in the last few days, so I wrote up a little something on that. But it's all Son of Sam adjacent stuff. So, yeah, that's
awesome. And I'll make sure these links are in the show notes for folks to check out. And we'll be diving into some of those blog posts here in a second, because that death mask one, I find that a very interesting and important case for folks to understand what's going on with all that. But before we get into that, Julia, thanks again, man, for joining me here tonight. What have you been working on the Cosmic Peach podcast?
So I'm actually working on something that I was talking to John about before we started recording, or before we went live, which is program serial killers. It's one of my favorite subjects to talk about. I actually have discovered 2 new program serial killers that were not mentioned in Program to Kill, but I've put together presentations on both of them, and those episodes will be coming out in a month or so. I'd love to talk to you, JJ, about them, because they're absolutely mind-blowing, the connections. But yeah, Cosmic Peach podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just Cosmic Peach podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. But yeah, I got a lot of cool stuff I'm working on. And this episode seems to be falling right in line with a bunch of stuff I'm working on too, actually. Program killers is the best subject, in my opinion.
It's funny you mentioned that, with this film hitting on so many subjects of things you're already working on, because it's not necessarily relative to the conversation. So I'll bring it up here in a moment of how that kind of this film hit home to me in some weird synchronistic fashions. Right. But to this program killer note, I think that is interesting. That I do think there is an aspect. I think McGowan was correct relating some of the matters to this cult activity in killings of the Son of Sam cult. and related to occult activity in and around Yonkers that Jon's highlighted on his blog, I do find that very relative. Those two conversations are the same, in my opinion.
Mm.
Now, these ones you were going over, they weren't by name Buffalo Jared Revisa, were they?
No, you probably won't even recognize them. If I told you the name, I bet you probably haven't even heard of them.
Jon, are you familiar with my former stalker and the guy who demanded to be my PR rep, Buffalo Jared Revisa, the apparent mind-controlled assassin who went on a multi-state stabbing spree last May?
I think we talked about it the first time.
I told you about him
a few months back. Yeah.
So I did a show the other night about a cannibalistic, homicidal, kid-diddling serial killer, psychopathic serial killer named Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, right? Would you believe the same Bridgewater State Mental Hospital that let that Looney Tune, on the loose to go murder and eat more kids in 1991, he moved to Great Falls, Montana, and continued his activities despite being a registered offender in the state of Massachusetts, and let out of the loony bin after already doing this to five other kids. Not eating them. He didn't do that until later, or at least on record. But he was let out of the Bridgewater State Mental Hospital, and that's where Buffalo Jared allegedly sits today. So I have a lot of questions.
Oh, come on.
I have a lot of questions.
JJ, the only thing that's even adjacent to being in a military program is being in a mental hospital.
Yeah.
They'll get you either way.
Well, I'm glad you said that. So to this point of how these homicidal, mind-controlled, hypnosis controlled, or whatever you want to call it, serial killers, right? The system time and time seems to just, inadvertently or accidentally let these people out. So in the case of Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, he had not only attempted to murder 5 children beginning at the age of 7, and by the age of 17 was in prison on a 20-year clip for doing the same stuff, keeping trying to kidnap and kill children dressed as a police officer. Edward Wayne Edwards would do the same thing, by the way. Nonetheless, his focus wasn't children, at least overwhelmingly. But nonetheless, Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, he tells numerous psychiatrists that he wants to kill and eat children. He tells the judge that. The judge says, it's no big deal. We're going to let this guy. This guy's not a danger to society. He tells another psychiatrist that after the judge makes the ruling to let him out of the state mental hospital 14 years after on a 20-year clip in prison for the kid kidnapping and attempted murder of 2 children, right? And when they let him out, he did the same thing less than a month later.
Fucker.
And you know what the district attorney did on that charge that he did when he kidnapped a kid less than a month later? And he was a 300-pound dude, so he would disable the children by sitting on them, right? This was his MO. He did the same thing. Kidnapped another kid, did the same thing, and the county prosecutor there said, you know what? This guy's not a danger. We're going to give him probation. So. Well,
that's the same with Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy. They kept getting it back out. And actually, one of the serial killers that I'm covering in an upcoming episode kept getting let back out too. It was like orders from the district attorney's office letting this guy out. I mean, I can't give too much away, obviously, because you'll have to listen to the episode, but it is crazy. And I did see in the comment section, they said, is this the 1981 movie? Yes, it is. And I had never heard of it. And I was actually really excited because I love horror movies.
And on these kind of same notes of the mind-controlled serial killer assassin stuff, when we're talking all these satanic cults and matters relative to the Son of Sam or the process, right? It is. And one note before I plug my the Anatomy of a Satanic Panic series starting tomorrow on Operation GCD Patreon. Nathaniel Bar-Jonah, the judge that let him out, was the special prosecutor in the Chappaquiddick case to let Ted Kennedy walk. Make that make sense. And the woman that died in there, Mary Jo Kopechne, she was the senior staffer to RFK on his presidential campaign. You know, the one where the process was associated with his assassination?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Teddy Kennedy, by that point in time, had already been documented meeting with the process and the Cambridge, Massachusetts mayor at the Process coffee shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts prior to the state. So seems kind of odd that this judge, you know, what I like to say is process folks are going to process, right? So, and this judge seemed like he was more than willing to ignore numerous statements from psychiatrists, statements from the actual homicidal psychopathic kid diddling, you know, serial killer maniac guy, and another psychiatrist after he made his decision just to say, you know, we're going to let this guy out. He's not a danger to society.
There's no coincidences.
So that I'll be going over certain aspects of unpacking the quote unquote satanic panic and how ridiculous a lot of these concepts are and how they revolve around around the psychological operations component specifically and other matters around this guy, Colonel Michael Aquino. Now, Julia, are you familiar? This is relative to Dave McGowan, John, some of his work he did besides the Program to Kill on some of these matters. Are you familiar with the infamous exchange that Aquino had with Dave McGowan circa 2001?
He had interaction with Dave McGowan?
Well, yeah. So another one of books, John, you may not be familiar with this one. Julia, you may be familiar with it. Pedocracy.
Yeah, the Pedophocracy.
There we go, Pedophocracy, the McGowan book. So Aquino read that, saw his name and other associated friends in there, and wrote him an email saying, "You're a madman. You're making stuff up. You're creating satanic panic." Was the statement Aquino made to McGowan via email. Obviously, McGowan wasn't buying it.
No, and also he probably read it and knew his goose was cooked because McGowan had all the facts there. He never published anything without having all the facts.
For sure, and it's a quite hilarious exchange, and I will be going over some of that in my, you know, outline and unpacking of this quote unquote satanic panic. That again, when a man like Michael Aquino is accusing folks who are stating facts, and again, McGowan, you know, provides them the facts, states the facts, as you were pointing out, Julia, in the email exchanges they have, you know, and it's kind of laughable his responses because McGowan has a way of being kind of sarcastic with being intelligent at the same time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. R.I.P. Dave McGowan. I love that guy.
Sure.
And also,
So, yeah,
hello, Maria. I saw her mention me in the comments. What's up?
Yeah, so that'll be a good one. So, on top of that, I have one more plug here before we get started here, folks. And I do apologize for any long-winded natures. I have we have a different occult and esoteric review coming up next week, don't we, Julia? You're on Operation
Yes,
GCD.
we do.
So I married an axe murderer, right?
Yeah.
That's not it. I got it here somewhere. Stand by one second.
Yeah,
please.
so I married an axe murderer is next week.
Yep. And this time, next Wednesday, we have a different occult and esoteric review with Cosmic Peach returning back, along with myself, Jen the Ninja, Kane, my Idaho 4 Abbott and Costello cohort, and of course Heidi Love from Unfiltered Rise podcast. So that'll be a good one. And then the following week, I have an occult and esoteric review on Lethal Weapon relative to all these Iran-Contra, speaking of serial killers, Phoenix Program Come Home ideas of David McGowan that we see kind of depicted in that film, along with the drug running that we know around things such as BCCI and Iran-Contra matters there. So that'll be a good one. And then I forgot one more here. I got this Sunday on Operation GCD Patreon Sundays, I got the serial killer you've never heard of, Edward Wayne Edwards. So speaking of more serial killers, this one's a real barn burner because as I state in the title, most folks have never heard of the man. He's one of the most, if not the most, diabolical serial killer in American history. So
damn,
you like dark shit, that's a good one.
That's a statement right there, JJ.
Absolutely. So on that note, let's talk more serial killers. Did I cut out my back?
No, you're good. You want John to go first?
Well, I was going to say, let's me bring up the film first. Yeah, we'll actually, you know what? Let's jump into some of John's work, if you don't mind, on the Son of Sam stuff. So I'm sure, Julia, you'll be knowledgeable in some of these topics he's discussing here in his blog posts.
Yeah.
So, John, what's been your? It seems like you on your blog post, from what I've read off your recent ones, you've been highlighting the ongoing activity, right? You did some of the ongoing activities here in the Yonkers.
Yeah, that's just a very recent story from Westchester County about new or recent animal mutilations.
Interesting.
One of the New York City Councilwomen even acknowledges that it's cults that are doing this. So that I don't think this kind of activity ever stopped. I think it was going on well before the Son of Sam era, but it continued long after Berkowitz was arrested and the case was allegedly over. So yeah,
John, color me shocked that Westchester County remains a den of iniquity today, as it did back in 1977.
Yeah. But it
says right here, though, right? Like you said, that these are fringe groups mutilating and killing animals, says New York City Councilwoman Joanne, and that's a real name, Areola.
Mm-hmm. Areola. So, John, is it your opinion that this is accurate, or are they giving us more smoke and mirrors? Like, are they trying to distract us? Like, oh, you look at this. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think this one is because when I started to get into like full-time research, I had read another story. I think it was actually in USA Today, where similar things were happening to this like 4 or 5 years ago. So it appears to be ongoing up there. Now, what it's attached to, who's in charge of the activity these days, I couldn't say, but and I've spoken to people from the area, and everybody seems to sort of be aware on some level that this kind of stuff has always happened and continues to happen. I think it is legit. Of course, there could be way worse things that are happening, that are behind the scenes that we don't see. But at the very least, this continued ritual sacrifice of animals, I think, indicates that basically the same practices are still being conducted in that area.
Okay, I gotcha.
And it's kind of never stopped. If you look at, just from my take on all these matters, is looking at some of the newspaper accounts, there's records of mutilated animals throughout Westchester, Putnam, even Fairfield County, Connecticut. So throughout the 80s, even. Yeah. Into the 90s. So it didn't seem like it ever really stopped, right? They may shift their mode of operations and where their locations are doing things, maybe, I guess, right? But
right,
an ongoing enterprise.
Yeah, different public parks and things like that. But it's always in areas where they seem to leave some traces of evidence deliberately so that people will see it and talk about it. And I think that's an ongoing preoccupation of these groups.
Well, I'm glad you said that. So on that note, what do you think they're doing that for? Is it a psychological terror campaign to scare America when they're leaving things behind? They could just as easily clean it up, as you just pointed out, and I do agree.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think it's like Peter Straub said in the novel Ghost Story. They like to flaunt themselves. They like to leave breadcrumbs. It's a perverse thing. I think it's like people who are flashers or something like it. People just they want people to see it. Whatever it is they're doing,
sure.
They have to have an audience of some type for it. So I think
it is kind of that same kind of ego-driven kind of thing, right? Where they're trying to force other people to look at them naked.
Yeah.
My math teacher did that in high school. He forced people to do that. It was after high school, but sadly, he's one of my favorite teachers in high school. But he was driving around after a couple years later, just getting women to pull over on the local highway or whatever, and then running out there with an overcoat on, saying, look at this, and then these things happen. Who knows what causes it? Yeah, check out this ding dong. Who knows what causes these activities? But these things do happen.
What the fuck?
And I think it is the kind of thing that has to be like a deep-seated compulsion for people to do it at all. Because if they sat and thought about it rationally, that they wouldn't be out there doing it. But yeah.
Speaking of, this is a 1981 movie, and I was actually surprised how much full frontal they showed in this
there's
movie.
A lot in this.
Yeah. It's it was
the
definitely
PG-13,
surprising.
Julia.
Really, was it?
Yeah, I forgot this as an adult because I remember my son's 18 now, but almost 18, but when he was about 7 or so, I was, introducing him some films from my childhood, and I totally forgot how much full frontal was in the film Howard the Duck. And then I realized, I'm like, it's PG, right? But then I realized they didn't invent PG-13 for a couple more years because there's a lot of full frontal on it. There's women banging ducks in that film. That's a really weird film, and of course it's a Marvel story, right?
Bestiality at its finest.
But yeah, they got away with a lot of stuff in the early '80s. I feel like in some of these films, this one had some more nudity than I thought was coming in it. But it is a horror film.
Yeah,
in
me
the
too.
80s, so.
Right. Yeah. You always know somebody's going to die if their penis or tits are out.
I was offended by the cock shot early on in the film. I was offended by that. There was no need to show the man's penis falling out of the building.
That what
wasn't
made it
necessary.
is that it was like a green screen thing, and you could see the outline as he fell. The whole scene is just really odd looking.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of low budge, I would say. But it's got a lot of aspects of like a classic 80s horror movie.
It's funny you say that. It comes off low budget, doesn't it?
It does come off low budge. It really does.
They spent $13.5 million on it.
That surprises me because, like, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, but like the scenes where it shows the woman as a skeleton, and she's all, it looks like something that you could get at Spirit Halloween.
Right?
It just kind of.
It looked worse than that Minnesota mind control assassin over the weekend, right? And then his mask, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. But I don't want to get too far ahead into the movie or anything, but I will say I did enjoy it because I feel like it's a story. I think it's the predecessor actually to many horror movies that have the same outline. I don't know if it will be integral to anything John's going to point out, but the idea of the vengeful spirit coming back and attacking the living and like taking them out one by one. It's repeated throughout a lot of horror movies. This might have been the first one that did that. I'm not sure, but have you guys ever seen a horror movie called Shudder? It was originally a Japanese horror movie that was like Americanized.
No.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Well, it's the same concept. I would say like movies like Grudge, where it's like the bad guys killed somebody and their ghost comes back and kills them off one by one kind of thing.
Which is what we have here in Ghost Story, huh?
Right. Yeah, I do feel like it's an idea that's been kind of like maybe they ripped it off of this movie because it's not as well known as some of the more popular ones, but
sure,
it's older than them. So I'm thinking maybe they ripped it off of this movie because
you bring up some good points. And I don't want to cut you off there, but before we go any further, this is going to be the number one Halloween costume of 2025, I imagine. But this was the Vance Boatler guy, right? He seemed like, speaking of horror stories, should just watch this guy's story of the weekend. That's a horror story right there. The psyop they try to pass off on folks.
I didn't get to dive too far into it, but I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts on it.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I do. We can talk about some other time. I just want to make the joke there because it's Vance Boatler. I think that name's ridiculous, and I think that mask is ridiculous. Just as ridiculous as the horror mask you're talking about from Ghost Story. You know what I mean? So, as far as their low budget, where the money went, I imagine it was all coke and hookers, but that's my opinion.
Well, didn't Poltergeist come out in the 80s? Or am I wrong?
Yeah.
Think of all the freaking special effects they put into Poltergeist, it just didn't seem like it was upper echelon type of makeup.
That's what I'm saying. You gotta look at the Fred Astaire situation, and he's got a large amount of money he's probably dedicated to his his budget line item of coke and hookers just for himself.
Right.
And on that note, before we go any further here on John's blogs, we will go over these characters, the actors in the film, because there's some interesting folks there. But
yeah, definitely.
John, you also were covering the mystery of the McNutts. That's a more recent one of your, since we last talked. That's your most recent one.
Yeah, I was really interested in that story that I think we've talked a little bit about Jesse Turner in other podcasts, or Mickey Rose, the name that Maury used to refer to. I don't know where the name came from. I don't know if that's a name that Turner used for himself. But he lived with the process in New Orleans, and he recalled an incident where a fellow process member was hung up. It sounds like on a wall or something, but tied up and bled to death. And the person who
Fuck's
did it
sake.
was this person he refers to as Adam McNutt, and Adam's wife apparently was named Karen. And it's a gruesome. Maury referred to this just very, very briefly in the epilogue of the expanded edition of his book. That
Yeah, I'm not hip. I'm not hip to this at all, but I'm
I'm
very
not hip
interested.
to this either. I'm very
What
interested.
years are we talking here? This crucifixion situation in New Orleans with the process.
This was in the early 70s when Turner lived with the process in the French Quarter. They had a house there, and
Interesting.
he said that he witnessed this murder, and then the Adam and Karen, the McNutts, took the body away in a car. He never saw Karen again, but then Jesse Turner, evidently travels west with Adam after this is all over with, and they go to try to set up headquarters for the process in other areas in the United States.
New cells, right?
Yeah. So
Yep.
it's in the files that we have, he doesn't really elaborate on the incident very much, but it is this is publicly available information now, and it's I've searched and searched in vain for any trace of Adam and Karen McNutt. So I'm guessing that those probably weren't their real names, but just the fact that the incident, the way the incident is described, it seems pretty significant to me, because I would guess that the process didn't do this on only one occasion. I think this probably happened a lot. We get some pretty spooky accounts of, like Peter Straub wrote about a New Orleans incident in the novel Ghost Story, which didn't make it into the film, unfortunately, but that's part of what I cover in that Substack.
So, and I'll kind of put a pin in that, but I am interested in your analysis, because I didn't read the book, but I'm interested in your analysis and what was included and what was not included there. But it's interesting about the McNutts. I'll have to look into that myself. After reading your article, it's the first I heard of it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when we got the files, it jumped out at me. But all of the Mickey Rose / Jesse Turner files are really interesting, because he knew firsthand about this process stuff. And then later in New York, he became friends with Michael Carr. But I would recommend everybody go and read the files at thepeopleversusdavidberkowitz.com.
And I'll get a link in their description for that too. So it's interesting you said that he knew about details of the cult. And again, that's what's most telling to me about tonight's movie review is Peter Straub, when he wrote that book, clearly knew details of this cult activity when he wrote that in 1978, right? Because Berkowitz was arrested in August 10th of 77, and Straub publishes this in January 1st of 79. So, we're less than 18 months.
That's right. I think that's what's so important about the novel, and a lot of other Straub's work too, because there are references to this stuff sprinkled throughout virtually every book he ever wrote, right up to the end. But what's so important about it is it's an entirely separate confirmation that this cult activity actually happened. It's a totally separate confirmation of the existence of the Yonkers cult, because as far as we know, Straub never had any contact with Maury Terry, and this novel was published long, long before Maury wrote The Ultimate Evil. He was just putting his work together in a few newspaper articles at that time. So just as Maury was really getting into writing about this stuff in newspaper form, Straub had already published an entire novel that just page after page references members of the cult, Westchester place names, other place names that were connected to the cult and its membership. It's really spooky because, yes, Straub clearly had a firsthand source for all this stuff. And really, I think the only question is who was his source. But it's right. It's very disturbing when you start to, the references really pile up after a while.
Do you think he was involved in the cult himself?
Where I think that there's at least one clue to where he might have found out about this. He dedicates the novel to a couple of different people. what are their names here? Valley Shio, Shaio, and Gregorio Cajon. Those were they weren't married at the time, but they married later. They're both psychotherapists, but they're both Tavistock R.D. Lang alumni. So the fact that he dedicated the book to them, that seems to provide a clue as to where he might have obtained some of this information.
You mean to tell me he dedicated this book?
He's not in it, though. He's like
go ahead,
part
Joey.
of it.
It feels that way, unfortunately. I can't confirm it. He named his
You mean to
daughter.
tell me he dedicated this book to the Tavistock?
To two Tavistock alumni, Gregorio Cajon and Valley Shio, and he named his daughter Emma. One of her middle names is Valley, so he apparently these folks were good enough friends with him and his family that he named his daughter after Valley Shio. So it gives you something to think about. Yeah.
Look no further, John. I think you've located the epicenter of activity between Peter Straub and the Process Church cult activity via the Tavistock.
No wonder his books are full of shit. What?
Well, I hated to find it out because I love his books. I mean, there's no writer I love more than Straub. I mean, he was a brilliant storyteller, just an amazing writer. So I almost found it upsetting when I always knew there was something about Ghost Story because all these links just kind of pop up at you. But to the extent that it is, especially in that book, it really does. Once you sit down to think about it, it really is. It's disturbing.
Well, there's no music I love more than the Laurel Canyon scene. So.
Right. It's the same way with that. It's just like so much of what you listen to and read, you look at it and say, oh my God, all this stuff is connected to these horrible programs. But yeah, the links unfortunately are there.
Who doesn't
Y'all are spot on.
I
got a couple things on. Oh, go ahead, Julie.
I said, who doesn't love the Beatles? They're Tavistock.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to say the Beatles, but you were close because I was going to say Rolling Stones. I got a couple of details on deck for tonight's tale that include some of these bands, like the Stones, right? The Processian Stones, or the Processian Beatles, for that matter, or the British invasion. What really was that British invasion, right?
Right. Well, yeah. Particularly with the Beatles, because that was the one that was their flagship group. Yeah.
So
I agree because you got Jane Asher, who's Paul McCartney's girlfriend, and her brother is confirmed member and owner of the Indica coffee shop there in the Mayfair district of London, where the Beatles are convening, and John meets Yoko. And it's funny because Peter Asher goes on to be a major Hollywood music producer involved in the Diddy scandal. Just saying. Yep. And their first cousin is, I believe she's still alive there at the Process Mothership in Kanab, Utah. She's a founding member.
Yeah. So do you feel like they put aspects of like the important aspects from the book into the movie? Because I did have a few questions about one or two things I picked up on from the movie, but do you feel like they left some of it out?
Julie, may I just interject real quick? Julie, can we put a pin in that real quick? We'll do the story here. One second. I just want to close out one more blog entry with John, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay, sure.
So relative to this entry, John, I think I found most intriguing is, in my opinion, the first investigator into the process was Jim Garrison, the New Orleans district attorney, based upon his own work and whatnot. When you're saying that stuff with the McNutt situation was popping off in the early 70s, he was running an office in 73 there in New Orleans. So I think that's an interesting time frame to look at around those activities in that, relative to your McNutt mystery. I think there is some other activities going on in New Orleans that may, in fact, be, interesting things to uncover.
Absolutely. There was a lot happening down there, and things were happening in Yonkers at the same time. A lot of children were disappearing. So, yeah. Very
interesting. So the quick highlight, if we can, on these before we do the film review, John, the true scope of the Son of Sam. What do you mean by the true scope?
Yeah, well, that's Walter Brown's mugshot, or Ace Brown, the notorious Yonkers pimp. Yep. And a lot of what we know about these other aspects of the case comes from Walter. And he knew all these other people. He knew Sue Conway and all these important major figures in the Yonkers cult.
And if I may, he also knew a lot of other folks. Like he connects to the Dean Coral situation, if I'm not mistaken, right? Right, Julia? You familiar with that? I'm sorry, not Dean Coral. No, what's Coral's?
John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, but what's the guy in between those two?
Philip Paskey.
Yeah, Norton, maybe. What's his name?
Oh,
Anyhow.
You're talking about the guy with the pedo island, Norman.
Norman. Well, yeah. So, Norman's associates with I think Gacy and Coral, if I'm not mistaken. And
what
he's
was
also
his name? John Norman.
Yeah, I'll look it up in a minute. I don't want to get too diverted, but this dude is connected to a lot of stuff, is he not? He was connected to a different pedo network, right?
Yeah. It was a network coming out of Dallas that they were all connected to.
That moved to Chicago, right? Because Norman gets
moved to
popped
Chicago.
in Dallas and goes. Like the next day, he's got a whole new 10,000 note cards full of customers and clients in the Chicago.
That is correct. Yep, that is correct.
So I apologize there to distract you there, John. If you may continue on about your blog post here about Ace Brown, because he is a very important character, is he not?
Yeah, he was. He was when Maury typed up what he called his flipper list when Yonkers had sort of uneasily reopened the case in the mid '90s. The people that Maury felt they needed to flip to get the case to a grand jury were, Ace Brown was number one. Sue Conway was number two. She's my sort of pet suspect. I'm fascinated by her, and I've done a lot of research on her. And then so many other people that were associated with the Yonkers cult, even before the process came into the picture, they were on that list too. And
you're saying this was a like a pre-existing operation that the process kind of co-opted then.
Right. The Yonkers cult had been there for many years, and they apparently, the process started to call the shots in the late 60s or early 70s. And so by the early 70s, when all these kids are starting to disappear primarily from the Graham School and orphanage in Hastings, which is a neighboring town, it's the process who's controlling the action by that time. Yeah.
So they were, if I'm hearing you correctly, they were after orphans?
Yeah. From what John Carr told Paul Rainieri, they took a lot of children from the Graham School because they were orphans, and John's rationale for the cult doing that was that the kids wouldn't be missed. Nobody really tried to keep track of them. Even the school didn't try to find out what had happened to the kids. And,
much like the Franklin scandal with the Boys Town.
It's like that, just convenient disappearances of kids that nobody really cares about or is trying to take care of. It's really, it's sad.
Same really, pattern of behavior, right?
Yeah.
So I see here you highlighted that. What's that, Julia?
I said they love orphanages.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, well, yeah, there's lack of accountability, right? No one's paying attention. So I like that you've highlighted this. I like this. Brown said in December of 1996, it's a direct quotation from Maury's files. Ace Brown said, "I was told kids were buried there," referring to Untermeyer Park in Yonkers. And he's not the only person to say that, is he?
That's right. Multiple witnesses or sources told police the same thing. Sue Conway said that too. She said she heard that kids were buried there. I would imagine she presided over at least some of those sacrifices and burials firsthand, because that's the kind of person she was. But yeah,
Sue Conway.
And multiple sources told the police that same thing, that children had been sacrificed in rituals and then buried in the park. That's true.
Interesting. And Sue Conway met an early demise, right?
Well, no, she.
Oh, that's the one. That's when they died of cancer. I always play a guessing game with you, John, on who's alive and who died.
She was, Sue. She was apparently very ill in the years leading up to her death, but she had lived really hard. A lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, but she
sex and rock and roll, right?
2000 or early 2000. I forget whether. I think it was January of 2000. And she was something else. She really is. She's kind of a movie unto herself.
So let me ask you all this. This is John David Norman, the Diddler Fellow operation from Dallas to Chicago, who's associated with Phil Paskey, who worked for John Wayne Gacy, and Ace Brown apparently ties into Norman, from my understanding as well. And that they have links. And isn't it interesting that John Ranieri would know, would be familiar with Jeffrey Dahmer and Gacy both had recruited their victims from the same gay club. Like, what is this weird? You see these weird epicenters of act. I mean, that's a lot of details. I understand a lot of ins, a lot of outs, couple what have yous, but it seems like all these people know each other. And I know what they say. We don't know each other, but it seems like all these people know each other.
They're part of a network. I was just telling John that before we got started today, that all of these assholes are a part of a network, and there's multiple assailants. But all the crimes get blamed on one guy. He's like the scapegoat guy. But there are so many people who are getting away with it, and then their crimes just get attributed to, let's say, one John Wayne Gacy or one Dean Corll, one Jeffrey Dahmer. But there are several weirdo, kid diddling, pedophilic, cannibalistic serial killers amongst us, and most of the time we don't even know who they are.
You ain't kidding, Julia. You ain't kidding.
Yep, it's true. And there has to be a network. It just doesn't make sense any other way.
100.
Yeah. Yeah, and
you mean like a network that may be like covered up under the auspices of national security?
Absolutely. Because in the Ben Rose case, the CIA pleaded national security. They said, we don't have to testify before this committee. So that was the end of it,
And how is that any different than the current Epstein situation with matters of national security, right?
Right. It's identical.
Right. Oh my gosh. I can't even tell you how much I love being on a panel with people who know what the fuck they're talking about.
Well, Julia, you're always welcome here at Operation GCD, and John is as well. So I appreciate both of your all's time, and the folks of the interwebs. And I got one more. We'll close out actually with the death mask murder, if you don't mind, John. And we'll just jump into the ghost story, right? Because you did this blog post, which is what motivated me to. You brought these things to my attention via conversation and this blog post, and it motivated me to put this panel together tonight and to watch the film. And I do appreciate you, sir, because I did enjoy the film. Wasn't like, again, it's not really my genre, so I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did.
It's interesting because there are some things in there that are important items from the book that did make it into the movie.
There you go. Let's start there because I know Julia had those same questions for you.
Yeah. What did survive were the strangeness of the villain or the villainess, who is played by Alice Krige. I think she's the single best part of the movie because all the strange stuff that happens in the book, the really creepy stuff, Alice Krige transmits through her performance. I don't know if she ever actually read the book, but she's the thing in the film that is most like the novel. So her performance is really interesting.
That is, so that's interesting. They would leave that out of the book. That's a great comment there. Appreciate that there, Cost. The Fuzz One was another party who witnessed these activities, and
that's right.
Another independent, recollection and accounts of these same murderous and ritualistic activities of people being buried in around these parks.
Right. That's right. And the testimony is really overwhelming. I mean, something happened in Untermeyer Park. People were killed there. People died in that park, and the only thing that stopped the investigation was the fact that the police in Yonkers evidently felt that an investigation would lead right back to their doorstep, and they were worried about their own skin, so they shut down the investigation. So
it does remind me also of the Finders, because they were spotted numerous times in parks, taking kids in vans, kids being transported God knows where. But also,
well, Julia, those are matters of national security.
Right. Yeah, the Finders. Well, to John's point about Alice Krige, is that how you say her last name?
I've heard it pronounced Krige, but then I've heard it pronounced various ways, so I'm never sure which one is. I just settled on one, but it may not be the correct one.
She's awesome in this movie. I would agree with you. She's the creepiest aspect of the entire movie. She's actually in several horror movies. I think that's just her genre. She's most recently in a couple Star Trek movies, I think. But so she was super hot in this movie. Proverbial hot 80s chick in this movie. But there was like this weird I don't know if it was like this in the book, but she almost seemed like a witch or something throughout the movie to me.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about her performance, because you get now in the book, the character that she plays in the film, she's much more than just a person who has been reincarnated or whatever. She has a history, and she has it with these old men in the Chowder Society, and they never come right out and say that there's an additional history in the film, but just the subtlety of her performance gives you the impression that there's more history there. Like that scene where she's holding her head under the water in the back. It's just so weird. And that's so much like the character in the book, just inexplicably odd. And like, to the point where the boyfriend is like, his nerves are so shaky that he almost can't be in the same room with her anymore.
Yeah. It gives you the creeps. And he said like, just touch her, even her skin feels cold. There's just like this weird witchy thing. Yes. About her.
Absolutely.
So was that not in the go ahead. Was that go ahead.
I was just gonna say that is, she, fortunately or unfortunately, that character had a real life counterpart, and that was Sue Conway.
That's what I was going to ask you.
That's what's so spooky. And you find that there's a photo comparison of Sue it's two photos a decade apart. But you see in the latter photo of Sue with the long brown hair, I think you see a lot of Eva Galley, Alma Mobley, Anna Mostyn in that photo of her. And in fact, even in the book, physically, that character, the description of her is obviously modeled on Sue Conway. I think Straub must have met her at some point, but I can't confirm that. But he definitely saw photos of her, and she was the model for Eva, Alma, Anna in the book and the film.
And you got a picture of Sue Conway on your site, right?
The picture of her is there.
Go ahead, Julia.
I was just gonna say, do you think the real person, Sue Conway, you think she's a witch? You think she's into some dark shit?
She was, yeah. She was. There was a source who, when Maury did an Unsolved Mysteries segment about the Son of Sam back in the late 80s, a source called the Unsolved Mysteries hotline thereafter and referred to her as, he said, I knew people who knew her. She literally was the high priestess of the cult. That's what they called her. So she was actually into all that stuff, and she was serious about it.
I knew it, dude.
Yeah.
I knew it. Just the way that they portrayed her in the movie, there was like some weird witchy thing about her. Yeah.
Oh, big time. Because there's like a mind control aspect too, right? With the two.
Right.
Before, I don't want to go too far in before we get to all the characters, but there's a mind. She's got some sort of spell over some hood rats, right?
That's right. That's right.
Some hoodlums, if you will.
And there she is. That second photo, I believe a lot of what's strange about that character in the book and the film, you see in Sue's photo there. She really was something else. She made an impression on a lot of people.
The eyes.
I agree. The resemblance is uncanny from the film.
Well, I think one of the things they did look for in the film when they were auditioning people for the role of Eva, of Alma, was somebody with that long straight hair. Somehow that is integral to the whole character. If you had somebody with shorter hair or something, it wouldn't have worked for whatever reason. It's that kind of hair just goes with all the other aspects of the character for whatever reason.
I also
this
think
is her in the film, right?
She has the eyes. Like, look at the eyes.
Yeah, but
the
eerie 1,000-yard
intensity.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say it's the same color eyes. I mean, they're the same kind of. They have the same shape, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's something about the eyes too. It's like they picked her because she can almost put you in a trance just looking at her. You know what I mean?
I think she did, man. I think she did.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. So let's do a quick, since we're going over kind of the characters, let's go back and revisit the storyline we're dealing with here. Would you like to explain the synopsis and however you see it there, John, or would you like me to read it from the Wikipedia, the source of all information on the interwebs?
Sure, I can synopsize it just briefly.
Nice. I appreciate it, sir.
Sure. In the novel, it's a allegedly fictional town called Milburn. It's supposed to be in upstate New York. In the film, if I remember correctly, they don't actually name the city, but it was filmed in Vermont somewhere.
Woodstock, I believe, is from my understanding. Woodstock was one of the locations, one of them. Yeah. And
there was a real town square that they used, but a lot of the backgrounds you see are just like really elaborate matte paintings, which is another thing that I really like about the movie. Really, really beautiful backgrounds. I forget who the painter was, and I'm sorry about that because he deserves a lot of credit. But the town it's supposed to be like a little sleepy small town, and there's a group of older men, affluent men, a couple of attorneys. That's Sears James and Ricky Hawthorne. There's a doctor, or I think he's thinking about retirement, but he's technically still in business. That's Dr. John Jaffrey. And there's the mayor of the town. And this is slightly different because in the book there were 5 characters, and in the film there are 4 characters. So they rolled 2 of the characters into one another. And the mayor is that's Douglas Fairbanks' character. He's Ned, right? That's and then I believe he's the first one to go in the film. But these men all share ghost stories with each other. They get together in formal evening wear one Friday night out of every month, and they tell each other ghost stories. But they're doing this to cover the real story that they're actually afraid of and that they're afraid to talk about with each other. And that story unfolds gradually, throughout the course of the film. But they all share a terrible secret, something that happened to them all one evening when they were very young in the late 1920s. And that's that event comes back to haunt them. And that's what the book and the film are about.
Yeah, and it's like it's got an interesting dynamic. That's a good explanation, sir. I appreciate it. That's
sure.
That one of the things I found interesting was this towing between what is reality and what is not reality. Like what's hallucination, right? And what's causing these deaths and what's not. Like, is it an external force or is it an internal force? And their nightmares, their heart attacks, right?
Right.
Toes that line pretty well.
It does because that's. I believe in the book and the film, somebody sees the first casualty jumping off the bridge. So, and then another one later dies of a heart attack. So there are things that could be chalked up to just mental distress or physical illness, and nobody really suspects what's actually happening. Yeah.
So the film starts off. That's a good point there. And the film starts off with the first death we get, though, is the son of one of these characters, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And we're forced to see his dick as he's falling out of a building. With some terrible green screen.
Right.
Yeah. And that's an odd.
I wasn't expecting the full dick shot. I was kind of again angry that I was subjected to this, especially without warning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is probably the weirdest shot in the whole movie, just because you're not expecting it. There's no reason.
There's no point in it, right?
To be in there, but yeah.
It's pointless. And then they show the body flop. I'm like, well, did we have to do the flop too, like the bounce?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it was one of those moments that they just wanted it to be a deliberate shock to the audience.
Well, there you go. I was gonna say, and it does too. It grasps your attention because of that shock factor for sure. It got me good. I'm like, oh motherfuckers! Did you guys just show me a dick and a dude bouncing off the pavement? What's wrong with you? That was my immediate reaction. I was like, how processing of you folks to do that, right?
Yeah. Well, that definitely is the point in the movie where you know that really terrible things are going to happen throughout the rest of it. So, yeah.
It does have that. It does set the stage properly, correct?
Yeah.
So now that we've laid the groundwork there on the plot line, I just want to ask you this one question before we go any further in the characters and whatnot and how this thing's unfold. There was a 1974 film also named Ghost Story, starring Mary Ann Faithfull.
That's interesting. I'm not familiar with it, but
is it the same story?
No, it's not the same story, but it's interesting. There's some interesting aspects to it, not the least of which Mary Ann Faithfull.
She's process?
Yeah, she and Mick Jagger both, and all the Rolling Stones. In fact, John and I discussed an interesting murder surrounding these folks in Westchester County, you know, that den of iniquity north of New York City. Last time we discussed this because we discussed the and John will have more details for you, Julia, but it's the Keith Richards domestic wife or girlfriend related murder, right, John?
That's right. Yeah. Anita Pallenberg. Yeah, but all those folks, they did the process. They were just like the Father Church, Scientology. They courted celebrities, and you know, the process. They went after the younger, hipper versions of celebrities that, you know, just like the just Scientology did. You know, more established. You know, like older film stars and stuff. But yeah, and Mary Ann Faithfull in particular, I believe she got pretty cozy with the Process Church, I believe. Yeah.
And then Keith Richards' wife there murdered a 15-year-old. Oh, I'm sorry. A gun went off when she was in bed naked with a 15-year-old. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, he was in her bed, and his name was Scott Cantrell, and he she got off for that whole thing very, very easily. And I know that the boy's family were very upset about that. But it was a very strange incident.
For sure, dude.
A gun went off accidentally. Is that the story?
Yeah, well, she claims that he was playing Russian roulette, that he was upset and suicidal, and that he, you know, the gun went off and he shot himself. But it doesn't appear that the circumstances were ever examined too closely in court, to me anyway.
Sure. Well,
and this was 1980, 79 or 80 or something like that?
79, yeah. That's right.
Yep. So after Berkowitz, so this is again this falls into the post Son of Sam cult activity in and around that den of iniquity, Westchester County.
That's right. Yeah.
So do you think this secret society, as they call it, quote unquote, in the book / movie, is based on anything real? Because they call themselves the Chowder Society, like.
I wondered about that because there was a group of allegedly in the cult during the 50s and 60s. There were a lot of figures of that type involved in the cult. There were doctors and attorneys and judges, and so it could refer loosely to some of those individuals. We know the names of some of them, and when he was writing the Chowder Society, it could have referred to some of those established community members. I think that's very likely. Yeah.
You'll recognize one of those names, Julia.
Who?
Carlton Gadusek. You know that one?
No. Who's this asshole?
Oh, John, please let her know who Anthony Fauci's sidekick, Carlton Gadusek, was relative to the Yonkers cult.
Yeah, he won a Nobel Prize for medicine in 1976, something like that. And he was born in Yonkers, but spent a lot of time outside there researching strange diseases in, where was he? On some of the Micronesian islands or someplace like that?
Micronesia. He brought about 50 young boys back with him somehow.
Yeah, he was very interested in boys. And when the Son of Sam case was reopened by Yonkers Police Department, Gadusek became, he was a person of interest and then some. And he eventually was convicted of child molestation, served about a year in prison, then got out, retreated to Europe, and died over there. He was a strange character, and according to multiple sources, he was present for very specific cultic activities, including allegedly the sacrifice of a child. So,
God.
Yeah.
Why does he look like the composite sketch of the Zodiac Killer?
He was a creepy guy, and there's a film where they an interview film where they talk to him, and he's very he just totally denied reality. He could not admit that he had done anything wrong, but
wow.
David Berkowitz was aware of Dr. Gadjusek because he was a major figure in Yonkers there, and he was tied into this cult. Yeah.
From 1970 to 1996, Carlton Gadjusek was the chief of the Laboratory of Central Nervous System Studies at NINDS at the National Institutes of Health, working directly for none other than Tony Fauci.
Oh my God. And they were probably boyfriends. Him and
you
Fauci.
beat me to it.
That little fairy fuck. I hate Fauci, I swear.
So you may know Carlton Gadjusek's nephew. He brought us the first season of Stranger Things.
Stop it.
Interesting.
Can't make this shit up.
Oh, come on, you guys. This guy's what'd you say, his nephew?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is his brother's son. Yes.
Oh my God! Come on.
He was the chief writer and showrunner for season 1 of Stranger Things. Just saying.
Oh my God!
Probably just a
Stranger
Things.
Things. Yeah, totally a coincidence. Stranger Things, indeed. Though I'm sure is behind all of that.
Oh,
so as we go back to this,
fucking God!
Did that just blow up your brain hole there, Julia?
Both of you guys are blowing up my brain hole, and here I thought I knew something.
Well, you do know stuff. That's what I like to do here. We like to exchange ideas. You know, we all have a different piece of the puzzle. I feel like, not to make it sound creepy or nothing, but it is a puzzle of sorts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is.
I heard it in a song one time. I think it was at the beginning of the show. The world's a puzzle. So I don't know why they called this ghost story, but they yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the same plot lines or nothing, but it is an interesting story. And again, it's just weird to me. It seems very processy when you got Homegirl and their Marianne Faithful and whatnot. But on to the actual ghost story, and that is the Peter Straub version. So besides Peter, let's start off with Peter Straub. So this dude writes this book. Again, Berkowitz is arrested on August 10th of 1977. He publishes the book on January 1st of 79. So let's call it, he did this obviously within that 17-month span. But I mean, you know, you pointed out how he dedicated to Tavistock folks. So that's right. A good indication of how he may know these tales. But what else is interesting about Peter Straub?
Well, he ghost story in every book thereafter pretty much contains some reference to the Yonkers cult and its membership, all the way down to they have mystery listed there in 1990. By that time, he was writing sort of like he wasn't writing horror novels any longer, but he was writing really, really dark murder mysteries. And there's a minor character in mystery, a police officer, and his name is Officer Spahoa. It's phonetically, that's
no shit.
Yeah, Spychalla. Now that's a very specific name because it's the name of a person who allegedly was at the planning meeting for Son of Sam in the spring of 1976. His name was Ron Spahoa. It's a Polish name, so it's hard to pronounce correctly. But this Peter Straub used it as a character name many years before Ron Spychalla was ever mentioned in the press, in any public mention of Ron Spychalla that I can find. But Straub used the name as a deliberate clue, just to let his readers know that he had not forgotten about all this strange stuff, and that maybe one day somebody would figure out this puzzle. So
because
yeah, that's how
specific
Straub was. Yeah, well,
he's so Tavis.
It does.
Right.
It does feel that way. It's a hard conclusion to escape, but yeah.
Oh my God, that's too specific. I'm sorry.
It is.
It's too specific.
Well, like I said, it's almost like finding a fingerprint. It's that definite. You know, it's hard to discount that. But yeah.
John, you need to start a podcast.
Well,
John's a wealth of information, isn't he, Julia?
Yes. Oh my God.
Well, strangely enough, and I'm glad we all find this so interesting, but I don't find a lot of interest in it within the community. It's just not one of those things that people seem to have caught on to.
Really? I feel like
well,
this is
Yeah.
one of the more interesting things in my
Well, if
opinion.
I may, you guys are hitting on exactly why I'm doing these occult and esoteric film reviews, because I think the one thing that folks can understand is when they see a picture of these ideas and they can relate them to a picture, like it makes a lot more sense to me when I see shit in a picture. You know,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
That's just me.
Yeah.
I don't read
So
picture books. That's not what I'm saying, Julia.
Are you special ed?
They're
JJ?
pop-ups, and I color them myself. Okay.
I saw something on the Wikipedia page for the author, though. I was going to ask John if he thought it was
Yeah.
significant. Hang on.
Please
Pull it
do.
back up.
Please do. Stand by, please. Stand by. I don't even know what I was doing there. I was just cruising around my tabs, to be quite honest with you.
Well, it looks like the first book. This isn't what I was going to ask, but it
Yeah,
looks like
you're right.
the first
No,
book.
you're right. Hold on. There you go.
Is My Namesake, Julia, 1975, but that's besides the point. It looks like he did some work for or with H.P. Lovecraft
And Stephen King.
and Stephen King.
Yeah, he and Stephen King wrote 2 novels together, The Talisman and Black House. Black House, that's one of the rare moments in Straub's career that I just didn't. It wasn't very good, but The Talisman is really good. The first book, I really enjoyed that one. I think he edited maybe a volume of H.P. Lovecraft stories for the Library of America, and unfortunately, a lot of that stuff has gone out of print. But that was a really good series of books. Yeah.
I wonder what's in The Talisman.
Well,
that's another. There's a character. In fact, the main villain in that book is named Morgan Sloat, and the surname Sloat comes from a roommate of John Carr's when he was in the Air Force. So it's there's just one clue after another in his books, and it's really yeah.
Isn't there a Laurel Canyon asshole last name Sloatman changed it to? Do you know who I'm talking about, JJ?
Are you referring to Jim Morrison's kindergarten classmate Gail Sloatman, who would later marry Frank Zappa?
Yes, and changed her last name. That's right. Yeah. Gail Zappa, formerly known Sloatman.
Yes, ma'am.
She was military, right? Her family?
For sure.
Okay,
that's why she was in kindergarten with Morrison.
Yeah, no, that obviously 2 connections in my mind, because I think that they sneak little stuff like that in there. Gail Sloatman, somebody wrote it in the comments.
Yep, there you go. Thank you, folks of the interwebs. So, these are interesting aspects. So, with regards to Spychala, like, I mean, you got to be in the know on that one, right? I mean,
that's you gotta know.
Yeah,
because that my understanding is like you were pointing out, is like that dude was like, no one really knew that name. Like that was one of the ones that my understanding Maury kept close to the vest, even, right?
He did. Yeah, I think Maury was right up to the end. He was trying to learn more about all these individuals because he knew they all fit into the larger picture. But yes, Spychala he's really, you read about his history and some of the stuff is just almost unimaginably awful. He's another one of these people. The reason all these people were there is that they hurt children. That was the common thread, because that's ultimately what this cult was about. The Son of Sam attacks themselves, I feel, were just the visible tip of a very large iceberg. And the case was way more complex than just the handful of shooting attacks that people know about.
Wait till you read Program to Kill.
I'm looking.
You're gonna go so far down the rabbit hole. You're gonna be begging me and JJ to pull you back out. I mean, it's absolutely mind-boggling. But I agree with you. I think children are a currency in these cults. They're traded and they are used for blackmail, among other things, sacrificial.
Well, there you go. You hit it right there. The way I look at it, it's the epicenter. I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off, Julia.
No, yeah, go ahead.
I look at it as the epicenter of the activity of these spooky blackmail operations. And, I've read enough Crowley, and I'll be going that on Unpacking, my Satanic Panic series. literal, again, I'm not trying to infer my own opinions, thoughts, or ideas against or judgmental on all these people. I'm using their words to describe these things. And there's a lot of kid diddling stuff that comes out of what people would call a religion if they're Thelemites that I think intersects with all this thing that they're calling blackmail operations.
Yeah.
Well, you should talk to William Ramsey about the West Memphis 3 too, because that came out of the Satanic Panic, and that was all weird Crowley worshiping weird stuff. So I mean,
and I'll be using that as an example in my series, but I'm actually going to be going over the cases and comparing the Satanic Panic around these major events, but using cases to emphasize this is a greater deal, just like John's doing here in the Son of Sam series. There's a greater number of cases that are not being depicted in the conversation because this is a larger pattern of behavior in occult activity.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, even in this movie, I think they reference in the movie something about occultism several times, or like cult activity several times.
They do. And on that note, is this an accurate statement that we hear from the chat? I appreciate this statement there, Wallhead Rick. So Carr was OTO wrote Straub's attorney, and Straub edited out the OTO reference?
Straub did in fact edit out a reference to the OTO in the original hardcover version. That's right.
No shit. Thank you, Wallhead Rick. That's a fucking barn burner right there, folks.
Yeah, he changes the name of the group to the XXX, which has a convoluted Latin. It means something in Latin, but he changed the name in the paperback to the XXX. But he also rolls into that multiple references to the Process Church. In fact, the villainess, who is, she keeps coming back with the initials AM. Those are just the initials of Marianne de Grimston reversed. So there's a lot of cult references, and they're conscious references. But yes, that's true.
You're blowing up my brain hole, John. You're blowing up my brain hole.
That is
but he
so
did. He
crazy.
edited out the OTO reference in the original edition of the book. Yeah.
And to the person who left that comment, Wayhead Rex, is that how you say
Wallhead
it?
Rex.
Wallhead Rex. Who the fuck are you? Why do you know so much? That was awesome. I mean, John obviously was going to say it, but still, that was awesome.
No, I know. Yeah, that's great stuff. I didn't know that at all. It's I mean, it's an interesting aspect to understand when you see the folks that get butthurt about their names appearing and stuff. I referenced earlier that creepy fellow Michael Aquino emailing Dave McGowan saying, "How dare you?" and McGowan basically just laughing him off with facts.
Yeah, with facts, literal facts. Like, hello.
I'm really glad that people are commenting about these things, because this is a discussion that people have so seldom. I mean, it's this stuff is almost never talked about, especially in relation to the fictional references to real life people and events. I said earlier, it's so obviously a separate confirmation that the Yonkers case actually did happen, that this cult existed, but people within the community just they're not interested in it really, at least not in my experience, because I try to generate this conversation over and over again, and it's just not really something that people appear to be interested in. It's just not on their radar for whatever reason.
Well, you know what I found, John? I'll give you and I don't want to tangent or anything, but I just talked about this on a podcast recently, and you might agree or disagree, but I find it interesting the willingness of people to listen to podcasts, but not to read anything. They don't want to read a book. They don't want to look up information. They want it to either be a Google away or in like some kind of a TikTok video or a podcast that they don't really have to like divulge too much of their attention.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're definitely right. It's sad.
It is sad, but I think that's why it's so cool, like, when we can talk about it in podcast form, because obviously I love to read. I don't have any problem sitting down and reading The Ultimate Evil or Program to Kill, Strange Things from the Canyon. I have no problem doing that. The thing for me is I then want to make it digestible so I can take it onto a podcast platform and talk to people about it and get them interested in it who would have otherwise never read the book or taken the time to read the book. So right. I think, book reading in itself is kind of like this dying art form. Is like, oh, what, you read? You don't just listen to Joe Rogan and like download useless information. You know what I mean? So it's like,
I like your approach though. That's a pretty solid approach you got there.
What?
You're saying you're reading books and then trying to, instead of you realizing folks don't read books, so then you try to digest that into or format in a digestible podcast.
Yes, yeah,
style
I
format.
mean, that's what I like to do on my show. That's why I think John would be successful at it, because it's obviously something that's very interesting. But people just don't want to read. Isn't that sad? People don't.
It is.
Yep.
It is.
People don't want to take the time.
Well, on my Substack, that's what I try to give it to people like you're talking about, in digestible form. You give them just a few paragraphs, and hopefully it's not so complicated that it overwhelms them, but it gives them enough to think about, and maybe that'll spark their interest, and then they'll go read a couple of books about it. But I felt like that was particularly important with Straub, because I kept asking people had they read the book, and everybody said no. And I said, well, there's all this really bizarre stuff in it that relates directly to the case. And I just, it was interesting to me anyway. So I started to dig deeper into it. And then it also correlated with it. When I started doing research, I hated making phone calls to people. I just hated it, because you could tell it made them feel weird, and it made me feel weird. But I found that the more I did it, the more I found information from actual firsthand sources who corroborated the references to the cult that I found in Straub's work, even to the point where this is one of the things that didn't make it into the film, unfortunately. But in the novel, the Alice Kriege character, this Eva Galley, Alma Mobley character, in one of her incarnations, she appears in a stage play, and she's a big success, and everybody's fascinated with her, and they think, oh, wow, she's destined to go on to be a star of the stage, and she's going to do a lot of great things with her. But she abruptly disappears. Well, for the longest time, I've been reading this book for 35, 36 years. I read it every Halloween. I had no idea that referred to a real life event. Well, I started doing newspaper research on Suzanne Conway. She appeared in 1975 in a stage play, then left town very suddenly. At first, I only knew about the play. Then I spoke to one of her fellow cast members in upstate New York, and he tells me, well, and I didn't tell him any of the stuff about Ghost Story or any of the rest of it. He said, I don't know what happened to Sue, because not long after she was in the play, she just up and left town, and everybody wondered about her. Nobody knew what happened to her. So it's a reference to the Anne Veronica Moore story in the novel, a direct reference. So the more research you do, the more you find out that all this stuff actually happened, and that so many of the events in the book make reference to real life events.
Real life shit. Wow.
Yeah. Hey. No, this is a great blog piece. Folks should definitely check this out. It'll be in the show notes for folks to check out.
JJ, doesn't Suzanne Conway remind you of Tuesday Weld a little bit?
100%. She plays a very similar role in this scene that I think Tuesday Weld plays overall, and especially in the Hollywood scene.
Yeah, and they're both like priestess level.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You got to look into Tuesday Weld if you haven't, John, because she's another rabbit hole that just never ends. But it's like the ones in these cults who are actually the upper echelon, they actually get kind of shielded or hidden or occulted from mainstream view, which I find
are you serious?
Very interesting. What are you talking about, JJ?
You mean to tell me people aren't held accountable for their activities? Is that around these cults?
Right. Yeah.
Is that what you want me to believe?
I do want you.
Now that is the pattern time and time again, right?
Mm-hmm. So this in the movie, actually, too, I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
May I just make a point on your booking on your statement there, Julia, relative to matters of national security on our left and relative to processed church folks who walk on our right. Cocaine Bob here walked on trafficking charges in cocaine in 1980, no time, and he walked on murder charges in 1988 of the Roy Raden murder, courtesy of Charles Manson's friend Ira Reiner, then LA District Attorney. And his co-conspirator there, old Cocaine Bob, was the Medellin cartel's number one dude in America's wife. She had just popped her husband 6 months prior to her arrest with which Cocaine Bob was picked up for and was an unindicted co-conspirator.
But you know how many people know that? You.
That's true. That's true.
And like whoever's listening to this podcast right now.
Well, we got 170 plus folks that are learning these things right now. So this is
right.
Definitely a barn burner. I appreciate it. I got to bring in the Cocaine Bob factor. Am I back?
Yeah. I mean that he's another
one. Did I never leave?
He's relevant.
Did I never leave?
You cut out for like a second.
So yeah, I mean, I just think, again, we're kind of drawing patterns to these activities and people, but these people don't get held accountable, do they?
Mm-mm.
No, they really don't. There was a handful of people in the case of Son of Sam who were members or affiliates of the cult who died in odd ways, in the few years after Berkowitz's arrest. But the people higher up the ladder, there very rarely are any consequences for them, unfortunately.
For sure. And I just want to highlight this before we move on. Peter Straub, unless y'all have anything else on Straub, but he says he wrote Ghost Story. The reason I chose to write scary books was because at the time there were only 3 horror novels and they'd been enormously successful: The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, and the other. And I just like to remind everyone, Rosemary's Baby was a process outfit with Roman Polanski, Cocaine Bob, who was on set every day, despite being the head of Paramount and hiring Polanski to do that. And I like to put a note in there, penning Polanski there for a second, because he comes up later here in tonight's tale. But if y'all aren't have anything else on Peter Straub, we can continue. But by all means, this guy's an interesting character.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about him personally, because it's just so obvious that he had a firsthand source,
Yeah.
But it's the kind of thing that he was never going to talk about openly. I mean, he talks about certain literary influence and stuff on Ghost Story. He talks about, Nathaniel Hawthorne and Henry James and all that. But those are the obvious things. What's not so obvious is like, hey,
there you go. What do we don't know that we don't know that that they know that we don't know?
Yeah, and I wish it was a wider discussion. I'd like to bring more people into it, because somebody's going to know something about this somewhere. We just have to bring them into the circle and get everybody to talk about it.
Well, to add on to your point really quick about this author and why I feel like it's significant is because someone that I comment on constantly, that I actually have a poster right here, Stanley Kubrick. Yeah. He put into his movies things that were not in the novels, right? Like The Shining, Clockwork Orange, Lolita. And the guy who wrote A Clockwork Orange actually ripped off the idea from a conversation that Stanley Kubrick was having with someone, and then he ended up directing.
Are you serious?
Yes. So Stanley Kubrick was at a party one night with a bunch of like weird German people like Warner von Braun and shit like that. And he was talking about the idea of A Clockwork Orange. The guy who wrote the book was there, wrote the book, and then had Stanley direct the film. But the reason I bring all this up.
Clarke? Or not Arthur C. Clarke.
Right.
Who's the Clockwork Orange guy? No, it's Anthony Burgess. Thank you. He's also got a lot of weird stuff embedded in his stories.
Yeah.
Right. Anthony Burgess. So why I bring that up is because Stanley Kubrick was supposed to direct The Exorcist, but he passed it up. He said he didn't want to do it. And so they got William Friedkin to do The Exorcist. But then because he passed up on The Exorcist, they asked him to do The Shining. And he took it and flipped it and made it occult and esoteric, and it is what we have today. But then look at the other book / movie that's listed, Rosemary's Baby, right? Polanski. So this guy is talking about, I wanted to write horror because I know how esoteric it is, basically, right? We got like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby. I mean, Stanley Kubrick was doing all this shit too. Right.
I would argue that it's all
books and making them, you know what I mean? It's like they're all kind of connected. They all know that they can slip stuff in there.
Yeah,
for sure. I would argue it's them trying to basically a public initiation of some occult ideas. Because you mentioned Friedkin, he ties into the gay club S&M scene with this tale relative to the Son of Sam story of the early '80s in New York City.
Isn't
That
it
death mask
just
story, the
crazy
death
to
mask
you?
story that John wrote about would be this environment here in cruising. In fact, Friedkin knew the guy that was doing these murders.
But
Yeah.
see how they slipped that shit in?
Yeah, and Friedkin's I'm just friends with this guy who's a gay S&M club serial killer. Don't worry about it, folks. Don't worry about it. And go Cocaine Bob will star his buddy Al will star as in the film about it, right? Because these idiots are just they're bragging about speaking of the brags we talked about earlier, John. They're just bragging about their shit, in my opinion. But
well,
I'm just a garbage can, dude. So who am I to say?
Well, I tell you, and I hope this is not going to sound like bragging, because it really isn't, but it's just such an inescapable connection. I have to mention it in reference to cruising. The Los Angeles punk rock band, the Germs, they did a couple of songs for the soundtrack. Actually, they did about half an album's worth of stuff for the soundtrack of that film, but only one of the songs wound up being used. There is cult history there.
See?
Yeah, in Darby Crash's background.
I didn't know idea Pat Smear came from that band.
He did, yeah.
No shit.
George Ruthenberg. Yeah, I don't. A good friend of mine knew Darby fairly well. She was involved in that scene, and in fact, she was Nicholas Schreck's first wife.
That's right. You told me about that. You told me about that.
But we were good friends, and I learned a lot reading about Darby because I believe he was almost certainly programmed, and that's probably a story for another time. But he was.
It's absolutely a story for another time, because I just put a pin in that, sir. That's definitely, this is all very interesting. Please continue.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's a lot of strange history there. He very early on, when he was still in high school, he had people from Scientology and EST and all these organizations actively messing with the heads of the kids that attended that school. So yeah, that's something we could talk about another
for
time.
Sure, dude. That Pat Smear connection ties into my. Speaking of McGowan's weird scenes inside the canyon, I took the framework of his story, the salient characteristics and points that he identified there was the framework of that operation in Laurel Canyon. I applied that same framework to Seattle grunge counterculture, and it's the exact same fucking thing. And Pat Smear is part of that counterculture. That's interesting.
Yeah.
The Nirvana, weird.
Yeah, he came in there Nirvana, right?
Love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, these are a lot of weird tangents we can get on with those topics. But back to the ghost story here, tonight's topic at hand, which I do appreciate your folks' time at the interwebs, and of course John and Julia and your conversation. I'm learning a lot here, as I always do with both of you all in conversations and podcasts. So I do appreciate that. And I'll only show this picture of Cocaine Bob 6 or 7 more times. So I do want to get that out there. So ghost story, and I just want to add this. And I ask you all this question here too as well. If you were to pick a character from the film and assign him to one of these Muppets, which character would it be and which Muppet? Obviously, we know that the female ones, that's the only one. I'm talking about the creepy fellas.
Right. I'll say that Dr. Jaffrey is the disheveled guy in the chef's hat. I'll say 100. That Melvin Douglas's character.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, he's my favorite one out of the bunch.
Ricky is the teddy bear faced one, I think.
That makes sense.
Actually,
okay.
Maybe Ricky is the chef's hat guy.
I think Fred Astaire's Kermit. I could see him, cutting a rug.
What's the last one's name?
Well, it started out as Gonzo. He went through a couple morphs, you know what I mean, in the GCD Muppet Factory. So it didn't come out as Gonzo, but he started as Gonzo.
No, but the last guy in the movie, the fat guy.
Oh, we got
always
Fred
sits
Astaire.
in the chair.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we got Fred Astaire, right? These 4 old Muppets that you all see there depicted in my Muppets take the ghost story invasion there. We got the cast of Fred Astaire, Ricky Hawthorne, right? We got Melvin Douglas. Y'all just mentioned Dr. John Jaffrey. He's trying to out JJ me, that son of a bitch. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Edward Charles Wanderley, and John Houseman, Sears James. These
Okay, John Houseman is the teddy bear faced one.
All right, fair enough.
I think that's
And then obviously Alice Krieg is Miss Piggy.
For sure. So when was there anything about the director or executive producer? I mean, I saw a little bit about the executive producer, but the director, he didn't really do much of note or of cults or anything that's seemingly of significance, to be quite honest with you, besides this.
I forget how he was assigned to this project. I know the screenwriter, Lawrence Cohen, he had done the screenplay for Carrie, the film version of Carrie. And he did a really, really great job with that. Yeah. And you can tell that he read Ghost Story because quotes from the book pop up here and there, throughout the film. So it's the book is so long and involved and has so many different characters and situations that you can see why they had to kind of fold some of them into each other and abbreviate some things.
Sure.
For the movie.
My only question with this guy, and you all may have the same kind of, Joel, you may be thinking the same thing as well there with your process church understandings. What was this dude doing in London in 1964? Because I'd be curious to know if he's hanging out in the Mayfair district.
Ooh.
The plot would thicken if he's linked in with the process in the Mayfair district in 64. That's all I'm saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Back at that Indica Cafe along with the Beatles, right?
Yeah. Well, he's the right age range, so it could.
Yeah, right. He'd been 24 years old at the time. He'd been right in their wheelhouse of recruits, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
No, and I just say that because like he's doing stuff in broadcasting and film over in BBC, looks like in that time frame, right? See, made for TV films over there and whatnot.
Yeah.
It says something about Christopher Walken in the 1980s.
Yeah.
He made
so this was his first movie. Yeah, this was his first movie in America, and then Ghost Story was number 2. But yeah, Dogs of War.
JJ, you cut out. JJ. Uh-oh. He's froze.
Am I back?
Are you there?
Am I back?
Yeah, you back. You back.
Yeah, he also would do Raw Deal with that shitty Belushi and Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Well, Christopher Walken is a whole nother podcast topic, especially his weirdness with what's her name? Natalie
Wood, yeah.
Natalie
Wood.
Wood.
Yeah, for sure. This is a weird movie. I'm reading the synopsis. This is a fucking weird movie, dude.
It looks like he has blackface on. Based on
the Angola mercenary situation.
Yeah, like why are they making this movie in the first place? Like and then they say that they based it off of a phrase from William Shakespeare. I just feel like there's a lot more to this film too, right?
William Shakespeare.
Looks like an interesting one. And I would wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that, a lot of those mercenaries that wound up in Angola, they were trained at Jonestown. The same grounds. They're right.
Exactly what I'm talking about, sir. This is the interesting details you're picking. You're picking up what I'm talking about there, John. You're a very smart man. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
I've just been
on that same note. That creepy psyop situation or whatever the hell that popped off in Minnesota over the weekend with those lawmakers up there getting murked in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. That dude operates a security company out of the Congo, and that's the first thing I thought of when I read that details. What you just said there, John.
Yeah. Things are still happening. I think we live in much more interesting times than people might generally think. All the crazy stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s, we still get our own versions of that even today.
Oh, I totally agree. I don't think that I didn't realize John Irvin did this film. I love this film.
I don't know if I've seen this one.
I have not seen this one.
To give you an abridged version, U.S. Army Airborne Ranger raised in Appalachia, Truman Gates, migrates to Chicago to become a police officer. And that's Patrick Swayze. All hell breaks loose. He starts battling with the mob, which is Ben Stiller, was like the son of the mob, in I don't know, whatever mob was in Chicago at the time. I think they were Italian, but I don't remember. But Liam Neeson comes in there and then he gets murked. Spoiler alert! And then that's his brother. And then then everyone comes from Appalachia there in Kentucky to come avenge his brother's murder in Chicago. They start murking folks in Chicago, Appalachia style. I like that.
Well, I love Bill Paxton, but I will just say
a lot of excitement in this one. A lot of excitement.
Yeah,
Bill Paxton. You got
Baldwin.
Good.
Which Baldwin is that?
That's not. No, it's the non-Baldwin Baldwin. You'll recognize his face. He's not part of the Baldwins.
I was going to say
for like a. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if he was part of the Baldwins, I just learned something very interesting about them today. That their bloodline includes all kinds of weird upper echelon, including like several presidents, Hillary Clinton, and like some weird inbred like.
Wait, who was this? Who were you talking about?
The Baldwin family.
Oh, I'm not surprised by any of this. This makes sense to me.
Right, but I mean, they were talking about it openly on this podcast thing, and they like bragging about it, like, "Oh yeah, we're related to, upper echelon and like these old inbred fucks that used to have cleft palates and stuff like that." And somebody wrote in the comment section, "Bill Paxton is dead." I know, and I'm really sad about that because I really loved him.
Well, now that we're considering John Irvin's works and he's more of an esoteric understanding here, I also love Bill Paxton. By the way, he's a great actor. I see Joey Rossellini here is the name listed as this character that kills Liam Neeson in that story, and it's interesting because Johnny Roselli was the famous mobster out of Chicago associated with the JFK biz, and a lot of the other characters we're discussing here within this processing kind of element, right?
Johnny Roselli was also tied up with Marilyn Monroe.
Well, that's what I'm saying. His sidekick was Frank Sinatra, and Frank Sinatra and the entire Rat Pack, in my opinion, were involved with the process. Not just Mia Farrow, his wife, not just Sammy Davis Jr., right? The stars who starred in Bob Cocaine Evans and Roman Polanski's cinematic shit show to Satanism, Rosemary's Baby. But there's more connections, and I actually have those connections on deck here. But before we go any further from John Irvin, do y'all have any more comments on him?
I don't think so.
No, I don't have anything to add.
How about the executive producer, Bert Weisberg?
Is he an asshole or not?
Yeah, he didn't really, these guys didn't really seem to do a lot of significant stuff after this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just remember seeing his name in the credits of the movie, but I don't know anything about him.
There's not much. Yeah, I couldn't find much about him either, to be quite honest with you.
Looks like he did a film there with Sam Shepard, which is interesting because he had a thing with Patti Smith for a little while. So,
well, as you say that, in that same Shepard, he stars him with Sissy Spacek. So, what do you got on Sam Shepard? Yeah,
he was just he had a brief affair with Patti Smith, and they wrote a play about it, Cowboy Mouth, that they both actually performed in. Of course, that's named after a Bob Dylan lyric, but mainly just his association with Patti Smith there.
Correct me if I'm wrong. One of these cult nicknames for Ronald Sisman was Sissy Spacek, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And Sissy Spacek was a Ford model, was she not? I believe she was. I guess my other quote. Let me rephrase that. This would not be the only Ford model connected to the Son of Sam situation, right?
Right. That yeah.
Yeah. I believe that's where she starts off, though, is working for the Ford modeling agency. And if I can unfuck my ability to click links here and move my doobie out of the way, I'll let us know that for certain. But I'm pretty. There were some other. Well, there were some.
Sissy's basic.
Wasn't there a Ford modeling agency connection? What am I thinking of besides possibly her? What was going on there with that?
I've heard something about that, but I'm reaching back years to figure out what I heard about it, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But there was.
Let's put a pin in for a future one because future one is in 2 seconds from now after I read this. Because in 1968, under the stage name Rainbow, she recorded a single, John, You Went Too Far This Time, the lyrics of which chided John Lennon for his Yoko Ono's new album for Two Virgins. So that's interesting. Spacek worked as a photographic model represented by Ford models. There you go.
Oh, there it is.
And as an extra at
you-
Andy Warhol's, right? So you have more connections
Yeah.
with the Velvet Underground, allegedly linked to this through folks like Lou Reed, right?
Lou was he definitely knew
Maplethorpe Smith, kind of that Velvet Underground Andy Warhol mix.
he knew Patty, and he played with her on stage a couple of times. I'm not sure exactly how extensive Lou's involvement in this stuff was, but he must have known about it because all these people were doing this stuff at that point, you know.
Yeah, they practiced at the Andy Warhol studio. That was their much like the Byrds did at Vito Polikas' studio, right, Julia? The Velvet Underground did at Andy Warhol studio, so we see the more comparisons.
Did you watch Men in Black, the third Men in Black movie with Josh
Brolin? I love
Josh Brolin. Yeah. Do you remember how they said Andy Warhol was a CIA agent and all the models were they were extraterrestrials, which I don't believe that, but I do think they were making a reference to Andy Warhol being CIA for sure.
I don't want to derail this too much because you just brought in a connection with his stepmother back to all these characters with Barbara Streisand. However, and that was with Warren Beatty, the Young Turk. So there's a lot of these connections with these people, right? So, well, I think we've just put a pen, at least in my brain hole, for a future couple conversations here. But if we go back to John Irvin, and we were doing the next up, I guess if we're not talking about the cast. Yeah, let's go to the cast. So we got obviously the most notable cast member, Fred Astaire, but I don't know. I'd like to hear what your all's thoughts are. I don't know that I've never heard a lot of creepy stories about Astaire. I'm open to it. I couldn't really find anything too creepy about the guy. So I'm open to it, but
I've never heard. I've never heard any particularly bad stories about it. The interesting thing about him being chosen for the role is that in the novel, Peter Straub says he describes Ricky Hawthorne as looking like Fred Astaire. So presumably that's why and Peter Straub himself said that was one of his favorite things about the movie was that Fred Astaire played the role.
Wow. Okay.
Really?
Who I think the main star is of this whole story is actually really just the author. Like he made this what it is. You know?
Yeah, I think it's the story could have been told by somebody else, but being told by him made it special. I think it did. Yeah, because it's a really, really great book, and it's I can't think of a single more brilliant author of popular fiction than Peter Straub, but it just, to know that he was aware of a lot of this stuff is just,
that's the
really
kicker,
knocked
right?
me out for a couple of years. Yeah, it was hard to see it in a different light that way, but yeah.
Sure. Well, I think one thing I thought was interesting with Astaire, especially because I think it goes for all four of the main cast members. This is their last film, right?
That's true. Well, except for John Houseman. Yeah, he did a couple more.
John Houseman did one more? Okay.
Yeah.
So
Which
we
one
see Fred
is
Astaire.
John Houseman?
He was
John Houseman?
The gruff, angry guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Let me bring that up for you. I don't know what happened to him here. Hold on. Stand by, please. Yeah, he's a pretty notable voice and face right in Hollywood, Houseman, over the years.
He was, yeah. He did a lot of commercials, and he didn't act until later in life. He was an acting coach for a long time. He worked at, I think, at Paramount. He was a good friend of Raven Chandler, but he didn't act until fairly late in life.
Well, that's interesting. Paramount, you say?
Yeah.
He died on Halloween.
Yeah, that's yeah.
That's weird.
Let's see how. I don't know enough about him to tell you how that went down. So eventually we'll get down there.
I think he may have had.
Here we go.
He looked pretty bad the last time I saw him. I can remember him, but yeah.
Oh, yep, spinal cancer.
Yeah. See, I didn't know he was married to Zita Johann, but she was. She had a really odd mystical quality about her. She was in The Mummy with Boris Karloff. I had no idea that John Houseman was married to her, but she was interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah,
he appears with some Scientologists as his last film. It looks like.
Yeah.
Priscilla Presley and Orenthal James Simpson, Scientologists of the film.
Oh God!
He was the driver's ed instructor in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, me and JJ just did an episode on OJ.
Oh, folks were loving that, Julia. Again, I have to thank you again for even suggesting that, because folks have been enjoying that one for sure. That was a real barn burner.
I enjoyed myself, actually.
Yeah,
that
it was a
was
good
a
one.
really fun episode. I was gonna say, just I don't know if it's the right time to bring it up or not, but you know
Please
what
do.
I thought
I'm
was
not sure
gonna
what it is,
happen?
but go ahead.
So maybe you guys, obviously John's gonna disagree because he read the book and he already knew what was gonna happen. But JJ, didn't you think that they were all gonna take turns raping her and then like accidentally kill her or like knock her out and then or like hold a pillow over her face or something like?
Yeah, I mean, it
and
is the 80s. It seemed like the rapey era of film, so I agree with you.
But like, you know what I'm saying? There's another
No, I know
movie.
what you mean. Like, you couldn't make Porky's in this day and age, right? You know what I mean? That was very rapey, right?
Right. Well, it looked like all of them had a crush on the main character, right?
They did.
And
They did.
they all wanted her,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
she was only interested in one of them. So that scene at the end where they're all trying to take turns dancing with her, I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen. They're going to take turns raping her. They're going to accidentally kill her, and that's going to be why her ghost is coming back to get revenge, is because they raped her and killed her.
Sure.
It didn't go as sinister as what I thought it would.
Well, I don't know though. If I may just interject, when they were dancing with her, I took that as them having sex with her. So you saw 3 of the 4 have sex with her, in my opinion, because 3 out of the 4 danced with her, right?
But it didn't show them having sex with her.
Right, but I'm saying it was a metaphorical. I think that, to me, that was the metaphor that they were all hooking up with Homegirl and they were passing her around because they were all, it's like the song from the 80s with Billy Idol, Dancing with Myself. It's about masturbation. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but there is another horror movie. That's why I say I feel like this book that got turned into a movie, obviously, was the predecessor for the idea of several future horror films. One of them is called Stir of Echoes. It actually has Kevin Bacon. It's one of my favorite horror movies.
The Kevin Bacon, ma'am. The Kevin Bacon.
The Kevin Bacon. And it's basically this girl gets raped by a bunch of dudes and they accidentally kill her and they hide her body somewhere and she comes back as a ghost and haunts them all and is trying to kill them.
That sounds very, very ghost story. In the novel, she's much more predatory. She gets drunk and she insists that they all drink and dance with her, and they're like starting to recoil from her, but she's being really vicious and awful. And she grabs Jaffrey and says, "Kiss me, you little toad," and all that stuff that she says in the movie. And then one of them pushes her away, just like, because they're all awkward and young, and they start to be repulsed by her. And one of them pushes her away, not meaning to hurt her, but that's when she hits her head. And
therein lies their curse of this lady, not the curse of Robert the Doll, mind you, which I, plagued by.
Don't even get started.
A curse nonetheless. And before, if I may, before we go deep dive into the full storyline there and how these things unfold, if we could just finish off going over these 4 actors that comprise these roles here, if we may.
Sure.
Melvin Douglas. He's he's the next guy. He's the doctor, right? He's the Jaffrey guy. Right?
He's Dr. Jaffrey.
Yep. What are your thoughts on why this guy was cast? Was there any specific reasons or anything else he did that caught your all's eyes?
I'm guessing he had been in The Changeling, another horror film a year earlier, and they were probably thinking about the casting for that film. That's a really good one.
Is that the same Changeling that would later get remade with Angelina Jolie?
I'm not sure.
Oh, that I don't know. Same name though, right?
Yeah, it's the same name. I'm just curious as to if this was the original and the one that Angelina Jolie did was a remake, because the one that she's in was about child trafficking and programmed serial killers.
That's this one, right? Yeah, it's a different plot line.
Yeah. The pretty much like a straight haunted house movie, but well done. It was written well.
So Melvin Douglas and that'll be an interesting one to check out. And then was there anything else that jumped at you with old Mel here? He's
like a classically handsome guy for the era.
Do you mean handsome?
I think he's handsome.
No, you know what I mean? Like Rock Hudson, you know what I mean? He famously joined Scientology, of the same kind of era of acting, and hide his homosexual activities, right? That kind of thing.
there's definitely there's always going to be some of that.
Right. He just kind of, he struck me as a very Rock Hudson type of character is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I found most interesting about this guy is he did a film called Be There with Peter Sellers, famously of the Cielo Drive Manson Tate Polanski process church situation out there in Cielo Drive that culminated in the Manson family murders. Peter Sellers was a regular, and so was the director of this film. That was Roman Polanski's best friend, Jerry Kulczynski.
So he's besties with all those fucks, huh?
Jerry Kaczynski, right here. Yeah, this was the best friend, born in Poland. This is best friends of old Roman Polanski. You know, Roman Polanski, friends with old Cocaine Bob. Roman Polanski.
Oh, here we go.
I think I saw Being There, but it was years, and I would have been a little kid when I saw it, so I don't remember much about it. But I do.
Yeah, I don't know much about it either. I mean, it says it's a satirical comedy drama, which is an odd phrasing of a genre of words, in my opinion. Yeah. But so Peter Sellers, do y'all know about him relative to the Manson situation and the process scene out there in LA in 69, 68,
I
69?
have heard, things about
I read about it in Dave McGowan's work.
Oh, there you go. What do you recall from that? Because he was very tight, right? With this is Peter Sellers with Sharon Tate in Christmas of 68.
Yeah.
I somehow, maybe I'm fucking this up, but wasn't he also somehow friends with the Wonderland Avenue people too?
Oh, that would be interesting. I'm not sure. That would be interesting though.
Maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe I'm remembering.
That's the whole
wrong.
scene. That's the whole scene. No, I mean those people were integrated in the whole scene come the 70s, right?
Yeah, like he bought drugs from them or something. I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
Possible. Yeah, I would say.
Most people know him
somebody
from
put
being. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, somebody put in the comments, oh yeah, Peter Sellers was a cruel psychopath behind closed doors, much like how they describe Frank Zappa among other.
Same scene though, right? These guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Sellers. So amongst these, the various videos and pornographies, et cetera, that were allegedly filmed at Cielo Drive, Sellers was deep in that mix, apparently, along with folks like I mentioned before, Josh Brolin's stepmother's old boyfriend, Warren Beatty.
Oh, Warren Beatty. Don't get me started on him.
Best buds, Kissinger and Cocaine Bob. National security never looks so sleazy. I like that phrasing, Todd Miller. Appreciate that. So yeah, I think it's odd. You see this deep connection with all these kind of, even within this film, right? You got these people that, you know, you got Jerry Kaczynski in the orbit. You got Peter Sellers in the orbit of what's his name? Melvin Douglas.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like guilt by association, right? Your friend circle is got some
it's like
weirdos in it.
Like the Beatles and the Stones and Keith Richards living next to John Phillips and
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the last guy we got here was the main four old dudes is Douglas Fairbanks Jr.
Yeah, Ned the Mayor. Yeah.
I got something interesting.
Please.
It says his first marriage was to actress Joan Crawford. Isn't she the one that beat her kids up and locked them in rooms and beat them with hangers and shit?
Okay.
Yeah. You've never seen Mommy Dearest, JJ?
No.
Well, you're fucking up because that is an amazing movie. And there's a lot of quotable lines from that movie. But yeah, she adopted 2 kids and then just beat the shit out of them their entire life. Just beat the shit. And she would handcuff them to the bed at night. All kinds of stuff. she was a psycho.
And I always thought she was one of the people that you could tell just looking at her that something was a little off. You know, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, JJ,
Weird.
You need to watch that because I even took something from this movie and I put it into my intro for my podcast because it's just so iconic. But anyways, yeah, she was horrible to her children who she adopted. And she was into, have you ever seen a weird horror movie from back then called Baby Jane?
I've actually heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever happened to Baby Jane?
Whatever happened to Baby Jane? One of my
I've never seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
she's in it. And
Oh.
the first time I watched it, my mom was like, "Oh, do you know the true story about what she did to her kids?" And then we had to watch Mommy Dearest after that. But yeah,
No
Joan
shit.
Crawford, real fucked up.
I'm definitely gonna be watching that. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So what else did her? So what? These weren't the. This wasn't the dad of that, right? No.
No. You're
Yeah, I
talking
think
about
she
her
adopted.
kids.
Yeah,
She
yeah, yeah.
adopted her
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, she adopted
Oh,
her
okay.
kids.
Oh, that's right. You just said that. You just said that.
Well, that's what makes it worse is because like she hated kids. So why the fuck would you go and adopt
Yeah.
two
Right.
kids
I
to
think
like
she
do
did
that
her
to?
public image because she was seen as kind of a brittle, unpleasant sort of person, and they told her, well, if you had some kids, it would improve your public image. And, yeah.
Right. And so she basically, JJ, she would like John Bonet 'em and like dress them up in Christmas outfits and stuff and like parade them
No
around
shit.
like they were so happy. And, and the kids were just getting tied up at night and beat with hangers and all kinds of stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Hoard out, huh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hoarding out her kids. So this is what I found interesting about Fairbanks. During World War II, he served as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Navy and entered World War II and assigned to Lord Mountbatten's commando staff in the United Kingdom.
Andy married a psychopath that beats her kids.
Right. Oh, you'll like this one also. He was later implicated in the Profumo scandal.
That's that's pretty much a direct connection to the process. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's long been suspected that Mary Ann de Grimston was one of the prostitutes in that scandal, but it's not been confirmed. But there is heavy suspicions of such.
Yep.
So he's the most interesting actor thus far.
Between him and Douglas, my opinion, yeah, those two.
Yeah, for sure.
So we get back into the plot line of the film. As we said, these four old men, ostensibly, at least metaphorically speaking, the film seem to have raped this young woman, and she, John, as you mentioned, she falls down, and they think she's dead because she hits her head, right?
That's right. Yeah.
This is the witchy woman that looks like Suzanne Conway, right?
Right.
This is Alma, right?
Right. Or Eva, her name is at that time.
Right.
And I hate to keep bringing this up, but it's just so there are so many points that there was a real Eva, and the character who appears later in who the Chowder Society consults to see if he can solve their problems is Don. Well, there were a real Don and Eva. In the book, they're called Don Wanderley and Eva Galley. Yeah, the real Don was Don Warner, the guy who directed the play that Suzanne Conway was in, and he had a wife named Eva. That's how specific Straub's references were.
You ain't kidding, dude. That's like on the money.
It really is, yeah. And that's right, Mary.
That's a little wild.
She was, yeah.
Yeah, dude. I mean, at some point, like, at what point in time did you consider like that Straub obviously knew a lot about this? Like, how many details of these before you're like, wait a second, something's going on here?
It was maybe late 2020. I was rereading it for Halloween, like I do every year, most years, and it was. I was sitting in my chair one night, and he was talking about neighborhoods and different places in this fictional city of Milburn. And because I had been doing research, I just realized that every place he's talking about is just a Yonkers reference, like all the street names. There's a minor character in the book named Venuti. He's the pharmacist. It's a reference to Joe Venuti, who was a political figure in Westchester in the 40s and 50s. It's just one reference after another, but it's the kind of thing that people aren't going to realize until they're doing, extensive newspaper research, like often tedious, but that's how I came across all those names.
Well, relative to that Wanderley guy you were just talking about there, it says here in your blog post, in the book's prologue, a man named Don Wanderley has kidnapped a young orphan girl from a park in Milburn, a town in New York State. He drives her to Panama City, which is the location of where John Carr was stationed, it says.
That's right. Yeah.
I just wanted to say this comment you got posted. Todd said, I learned everything about the Dutroux scandal from Julia's show. Great work, Julia. Just want to say that comment means the world to me because I worked tirelessly on that presentation for Program to Kill. I spent months putting that presentation together. So thank you, Todd. And the stuff we're talking about today is no different. I mean, all of this stuff, the references he's making in this book, referencing real life stuff, they love it's like a sick joke to these people.
Yeah, I think that it really is. Yeah. They think it's funny.
They think it's hilarious.
They go laugh about it, right?
Yeah, they think
I covered all this in Dragnet. I didn't. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julia.
No, I was just going to say they think it's absolutely hysterical that we just watch movies and read books and, you know, it's right in front of our face and we'll just never know. Especially what John was talking about earlier with that guy's last name. Like, who else is going to put that together?
Yeah, Spicala. Yeah, so
Spicala.
I totally agree with you. So I did an occult and esoteric review a number of weeks back on Dragnet. So folks, the interwebs, or John or Julia, if you folks want to check it out.
Uh-oh. Jay, he's frozen.
Yeah. He'll probably be back in a second.
Yep.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
So it's a 1987 cinematic masterpiece, Dragnet, Occult and Esoteric Review, where we go over the elements of the process being told there. And I'll just use to emphasize my point. I'll bring up one character from the film and show you the murder of Roy Radin. Right. So back to my favorite character here at Operation GCD, not Cocaine Bob Evans.
Oh boy.
He was the unindicted co-conspirator in the murder of Roy Radin. So one of the convicted murderers in that, the hitman that he allegedly hired, was a fellow by the name of William Mincer, the guy that, as John will tell you, who's William Mincer, John? Help me out with that one, please. Mincer,
he had he had an occult background. He apparently was pretty serious about his occultism. He was he's been alleged to have been involved with Son of Sam, particularly the Christine Freund murder. He was supposed to have been on the scene there, if not the actual shooter.
Yep.
And he's another one of these people. He's a movie unto himself.
You ain't kidding.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he was mentioned in Program to Kill as being like, they linked him somehow to being an offshoot of like after the Manson family murders went down.
Yeah.
There was the Cotton Club. Yeah, and then
too.
This guy. Yeah. Process offshoot kind of weirdos.
So one of the other things he was notorious for was being the security guard and chauffeur of Larry Flint.
Yeah.
And in the 1987 cinematic masterpiece, we're introduced to Jack O'Halloran's character, EML Muzz. He is the security guard and driver of the pornographer in the film, which is in part a machination of what I would argue is Larry Flint and Hugh Hefner. But he's also a major figure in the cult that has taken the siege of Los Angeles and co-opted politicians, attorneys, police folks, including the commissioner, right? And it's all run by a guy who's doing this. He's the head of the Christian organization in town fighting all this. He's the head of the Satanist organization, the pagan cult that has sieged it, and he's part of that cult. And Bill Mincer just happened to be the driver and chauffeur of Larry Flint, and Bill Mincer just happens to look identical to Emil Mutz. So you tell me if they're telling us a tale on that one. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, it's just like Peter Straub. It's like somebody who wrote this stuff knew exactly what was happening and they knew who the players were.
Yes, definitely.
To speak, so you see what I'm saying? How much? Yeah, no, I agree totally. But you see how much these dudes look? I mean, they play the same
mustache,
role, right?
Come on, and they're playing like the same. He's playing the real guy. You know what I mean?
And O'Halloran don't look anything like they had. This is all made up with the hair and the mustache they gave to him there. So, and it's interesting because this is what I like to joke this is what reminded me of this. Y'all were talking about the bragging. So Bob Cocaine Evans went and saw the film Wag the Dog, right, with Dustin Hoffman. And when this is 1997, he walks out of the film and he's asked by, at the premiere, he's asked by the paparazzi, what'd you think of the film? And old Cocaine Bob famously replies, I thought I looked great on the big screen. because Dustin Hoffman is playing a Hollywood producer who's doing a Bob Cocaine Evans character, right?
Yeah, the tan, the poofy hair, and everything.
Oh, everything. And I would argue that that whole film is a satirical take of them bragging and laughing on these fellas' relationship. Because
Sure.
De Niro was a man who Evans made his career. He made Hoffman's career, and De Niro plays a not necessarily a National Security Council guy.
Uh-oh. Am I froze?
My back. So
Oh,
I'm just saying.
I didn't know if it was me or you. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. So Evans makes both De Niro and Hoffman's careers. Hoffman's playing a satirical take on him. I just think that De Niro's doing kind of a satirical take on Henry Kissinger there. But nonetheless, he walks out of the theater and says, "I thought I looked great." So when this film came out in 1987, I often wonder if this fellow who was not arrested until August of '88 walked out of that same film and said, "I thought I looked great on the big screen."
I bet he did, because they said too when he was arrested, they found a copy of Maury's book, and it had his parts underlined in the book, and he told somebody that in this book they described what I did as a perfect crime, which wasn't actually true, but he had that conscious vanity about himself that when he knew he was being written about or depicted in a movie, he knew about it. He was happy about it.
Somebody is
totally
saying
agree.
something in the comments here. Hang on.
Is it Kane B? He was friends with a boxer named Fast Eddie.
The one before that, somebody's talking about a movie that has lead roles of Dan Aykroyd.
But Fast Eddie was the meanest son of a bitch I've ever met in my life. I think Kane's actually telling an actual story here. He used to work for a tourist trap restaurant in the 80s. Oh, so because Kane used to live in San Diego in the 80s. That's interesting, Kane. So he was friends with Bill. Your old boss was friends with Bill Metzer, huh? We got to talk about that fellow. Like, I would like to hear some more of those tales. That's going to be, I'd like to, that whole era. I feel like San Diego's no different than Los Angeles. Whatever cult activity was popping off in Los Angeles, it sounds like Kane may have been seeing some of that shit in San Diego at the same time. Am I back?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. I was just reading the comments over here. It looks like
I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, look like Headless is in the comments. People are on fire tonight. We got all kinds of stuff coming through. This is awesome.
It's good stuff. I appreciate the folks of the interwebs enjoying the show and commenting here on the chat. So, where did we leave off before I went on a Cocaine Bob excursion?
We were talking about how she basically they kill her.
Oh, they were bragging.
On accident.
They were bragging.
No, was that what we were talking about?
Yeah, we were saying how it was similar. They were bragging about these stories, right? But no, they killed the woman on accident. And then the next thing we see, right, is one of the characters' sons falling out of a building, showing us his dick.
Right. And you don't realize at first that she's
they get you.
That the woman he's with is the one that's going to be the central figure.
Right.
Well, that's a good point too. I thought you meant you don't realize at first they're going to show you his dick, because I didn't realize that either.
They show you plenty of tit action too, and butt.
Yeah.
From the
no
cute
shit.
girl,
I had no idea. Dan Aykroyd bought Mama Cass's house. Get the fuck out of here. That's awesome stuff.
Oh, come on!
Because he's already questionable enough, starring opposite Tuesday Weld, the 1995 film starring Keanu Reeves and Courtney Love, Feeling Minnesota.
Yeah, and that Dan, he has a serious interest, like in ghosts and UFOs and just the paranormal.
Yeah,
in general.
he does.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, John, and I cover that. You'll enjoy this comparison. I cover that in that Dragnet film that he, went into some of the Ghostbusters activities. I think his Ray's Occult bookstore was based upon the Magical Child.
I wouldn't doubt it. And
he bought Mama Cass's house. Oh,
makes sense to me. Hey, look, he started opposite Tuesday Weld. Makes sense to me.
That's like Jared Leto buying Lookout Mountain Laboratory.
Yeah.
And he's doing some kind of cult activity.
That was originally Natalie Wood's house. Holy Mazicious. That's some great stuff you got there. I didn't know that either.
Holy shit. Who is this person?
It's Mazicious. That's not shit.
Yeah.
It's Holy Mazicious.
Yeah. She has a lot of good information. I know her. She
is
does
this a
great
female?
research. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, man. That's some awesome stuff.
Yeah, some awesome stuff.
I don't know Nicholas Rourke. Who's that?
Oh, the Russian painter.
Who's that?
Sort of mystical.
Is he a weirdo, child diddler, cannibal?
I mean,
I don't think so.
Right?
It just sort of known as a painter of like mystical and occult subjects. Thank you, May. Glad you're listening tonight.
May, I need to get you on my show. What the fuck? Jeez, people in the comments are going, John, you brought the best audience tonight. Holy crap.
That's not, is that May Zish? Do I know this May Zish? Is this one of your followers?
Well, we're just fellow researchers. And
oh, nice. I was gonna say, because it sounds like I need to know this person. Much
we're both interested in the same kinds of things, and I'm so glad.
I didn't know Dan Aykroyd bought that fucking house. I've looked at a lot of these details.
I didn't either, but it's so great that people are talking about this stuff, because it really is. It's not, this aspect of it is not discussed a whole lot, I don't think, or maybe it is privately, but I've just never been able to engage a whole lot of people in the Son of Sam community in this discussion.
I'm hyped to see the interest, John. I'm hyped to see the interest.
I'm gonna have to put my email in. If you could put my email, JJ, at the end of the show, so people can send me an email, reach out, and I want to get May on my show. Holy crap, dude. Throwing out some crazy info like that. I need to know more.
It's a real barn burner here, Julie. It's a real barn burner.
Burning down the barn. Holy shit.
So after we see the unsolicited dick pic of one of the main character's sons that jumps out of the building because he sees the ghost, right? The ghost comes on him. What's that about? Why is the ghost haunting the man's son?
Well, he's one of the two sons of Ned, the mayor, and the guy that Eva actually liked in 1929 or whenever it was. He's one of the two sons. He's
do you take it as being like
Ned and Ricky, right? Ned and Ricky, right? Because the next scene we see is the father chasing after Ricky. He goes to see his dad for the funeral of his brother and tells his dad, hey, I was sleeping with that lady too, right? That's what he tells his dad, right?
Yeah.
But do you take it as like the sacrificial lamb kind of thing, like the firstborn son, like I'll get you and your firstborn son kind of thing?
That's what I was thinking, kind of, right? A little curse,
yeah,
right? A little Robert the Doll style curse.
I'm not sure how they actually were thinking about it in the film. I know in the book, Alma tells Don really specifically that, when we get married, I want to go back and get married in the town where you grew up. And I want all your father and all of his friends and everybody in the town to be there. And I want them to see me.
Shit.
She was very.
She does say that, and then the next phrase she says is the phrase she repeats at the end, right? That she's going to make them all kind of like she's going to make them all pay. They're all going to feel her or something like that.
That's exactly it. Yeah, it's revenge for what they did to her, albeit accidentally. Now it's funny because in the movie they really it sort of inadvertently, I think, turns the men in the Chowder Society into the villains, because they just kill this woman who has she's just a normal human being. In the book, there's already something wrong with Eva, and she already is this sort of inhuman, otherworldly figure, so that they think that they have killed a human woman, but what they have actually done is just anger an otherworldly sort of spirit being that just keeps coming back at them over and over at various points throughout their history. But she, even at the point where they kill her in the novel the first time as Eva, she already is not a human. She's something else, just occupying a human body.
Possessed? We're talking about some sort of possession?
She's a Manitou. She's an Indian spirit, one of these shape-shifting changeling things.
I knew it.
Yeah, it becomes people or animals or whatever, but it's always in the disguise of a physical creature, but it's not actually a physical person or an animal at all.
Right.
Yeah.
She's like a siren. She's like
a mythical figure. Yeah.
Yeah, and can lure you in with like her good looks and stuff, but then she turns
into
her
warning, right?
Yeah, right. but think of it like JJ, like that's in The Shining, when it's like a beautiful woman in the bathtub and then he goes to kiss her and she turns into like some weird hag witch thing that's like laughing and cackling. Like that's Eva. Like she's like some kind of
Yeah.
weird siren
Right.
witch.
Right.
We
thing.
see that a lot, though. That same sequence you just described from The Shining, we see that same sequence play over here in this film as well with this witchy character, right? This Eva Alma character. But it's the call of the siren is what she's doing when she says, "I will take you places you've never been. I will show you things that you've never seen, and I will see the life run out of you." She repeats that numerous times in the film.
Yes.
It's right. Like a chant. It's like the priestess thing. You know, it's like a spell.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's luring these men in with that, especially Ricky. She lures Ricky in with that statement, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And our real life priestess, that is the image she consciously affected. She was like that, Sue Conway.
Right.
Yeah, that was very much her persona. You know.
Yeah, you bring up some good points there. So then we see Ricky, and is it Ricky Sr., right? He falls off the bridge there chasing Ricky Jr., right?
Oh, well, Ned, yeah, but yeah.
Ned,
he falls off the bridge and he sees Alma's or Eva's figure there approaching him just as he's about to jump off. Yeah.
Yeah. And then after that is when we start getting into the bending of reality, right? Because when Fred Astaire goes to the house, right? Is that the next scene, right? Is that the next part?
It's somewhere early in there. I forget exactly when he goes to it. Now, incredibly too, that whole house is a matte painting. It's not even a real house. It's a amazing painting there. But that's I wish I could remember the name of the guy that did those paintings for the film.
That's incredible.
I'll look that up here in a second. So just looking at the that's right. So, doubting his father committed suicide, Don then the remaining three friends and tells them a ghost story, right? Approaches the remaining three friends. So then that's when the son's trying to get into the club, right?
Right. And they talk to each other because he's a horror author. And I think Ricky or somebody suggests, or not, it's not Ricky, maybe it's Sears, who suggests, well, Edward's son knows about all this weird stuff, so maybe he could tell us something to sort of calm us down a little bit and keep our imaginations from running away with us. So they ask him to come to town, and he attends one of their meetings, and Sears is really grouchy and offers him a Cuban cigar, but then Don says something like, well, let me tell you a story, and maybe that'll be the price of my admission into the Chowder Society, which Sears really doesn't like for some reason, and he blows up at him over that comment. But Sears is just kind of a cantankerous character like that in the book and in the film too.
No, that's spot on. That's what, and the next thing we see is them, and he's recounting this story, right? But that's when we meet Alma, right? So that's when it starts blurring the reality situation, right?
Right. So before Alma knew his brother, who dies at the beginning of the movie, she knew Don, and she approaches him when he's teaching at some university in Florida somewhere. And he falls.
I may put a in that statement because I got an interesting little weird thing that I saw in that whole Florida thing. I'll bring us at the end, but please continue.
Yeah, well, he falls for her, and initially they're planning to get married, but she just gets weirder and weirder, and he has more of these strange experiences with her, and it becomes impossible for him to ignore that something's wrong with her, and eventually one day he tells her he's breaking it off, and so she leaves.
This is all going on in the past. He's now retelling in the present based upon his brother already hooking up with this girl, right? So it suddenly when I was watching, I was like, holy shit, did this stuff just all collapse on me at once, dude? I didn't even see it coming.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that's very much like the book, is it's different narratives woven into each other, different time periods. And it starts to get pretty complex at that point.
It comes at you real fast, because then you realize the opening sequence when he saw his brother falling out the building in the dick pic, the lady that he saw was this Alma ghost, Eva ghost situation.
Same woman, yeah.
And he's sleeping with Alma, but he sees the ghost of Eva in her, and then falls out the window. And then you find out his father's doing the same. And then his brother's like, wait a second, I've been banging this broad for a while, guys. So
we got to have the last time he talks to his brother, he's in a bar and he says, David, don't marry her. Something's wrong with her. And David died shortly thereafter. Yeah.
Wild shit, man. Wild shit.
Yeah.
What was your take on all that, Julia?
Well, I just wanted to note two things that I thought
Please.
were cool from this part of the movie. The fact that Don knows that he has to, quote unquote, like, blood his way into the cult, right? He's got to pay his dues. He's got to tell this story to get into the secret society, right? You
That's
can't
an
just
excellent
be
point
let
too, because
in.
when he says it to Sears, he's like John Houseman. He's like, "Hey, I want to get in," and John was saying he's kind of offended, and then he offers up his blood sacrifice.
Right,
The
right,
story.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I felt like that was symbolic. And then when
Good
it
point.
shows him at the university talking to his class full of students, the only thing he's really talking about is being seduced and someone seducing, or him seducing someone else, or he's talking about like a short story, but it's all about seduction and like the weird siren thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's weird.
It's definitely
how
the weird siren thing. Sorry, I'm spitting because you're making a great point. I want to comment, and I was also trying to exhale, give a thumbs up, and talk at the same time. Apparently, I can't do all at once without spitting on myself. So that's a great point, Julia.
But yeah, no, those were two things that I took out of it. Also, just a funny part from the beginning of the movie when the dad goes to pick up the son from the train station. He's like, "Look at you, you look horrible." And he's wearing like a sweater vest and like a button up. Like, if you saw somebody wearing that outfit, you'd be like, "Oh, he looks nice. Where's he going?" And the dad's like, "You look like shit."
He wasn't dressed like a garbage
fucker.
can did, right? He was dressed, fairly, put together as far as style and whatnot goes. He wasn't doing flannel and headbands. What I'm saying, and again, that was an interesting scene to me because it's like he didn't want to. The son didn't want to go back there. He already knew the dynamic that they didn't know, that he was banging this lady already. He didn't want to go do that. His brother dies. There was a lot going on there, and then when he gets there, his father's just giving him heat. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I think that it was another testament as to the elitism of the family. Because
that's what I'm saying. Like, he's just getting heat from his dad no matter what he does, right?
Sweater vest looks like shit to the dad. Like, what's the dad on, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like another testament as to these high elite secret society members and their kids, right, dying mysteriously, accidentally killing people in their past and covering it up, like
total accident, shit. Julia. Total accident.
Yeah.
So while we're on the topic, now you bring up some great points. While we're on the topic, was there anything important about the scenes that we see there, the actual scenes, right? Like, not the obviously you made all those correlations between Yonkers and the fictional town of Millburn with the namesakes of roads and whatnot and peoples. But we see a couple interesting places, like Saratoga Springs is one of the filming locations.
Right.
Woodstock, Vermont's another one. I believe this was the downtown setting.
Yeah, I believe that's right. Yeah. I'm not sure if there was any particular reason that they chose those locations, but for the town square, it looks and sounds a lot like the Wheat Row of the book, the town square of Millburn in the novel. So it's very close in tone to what Straub described in the novel.
How about during the Son of Sam era? Was there any connections to the Kips Bay area of Manhattan?
Not to my knowledge. Although a lot of those members did sometimes go to hang out in the city, so it's possible that there's that one of them had a connection to Kips Bay.
But yeah, as much as I know about New York City, when I used to hang out there all the time, I don't know anything about that region of Manhattan. I was normally found at McSorley's, the oldest bar in Manhattan, McSorley's Old Ale House. Yeah, bunch of old surly Irish dudes. I highly recommend the place. Great spot. But I don't know much about that region. However, McSorley's is down there in that kind of Son of Sam East Village, not far from some of that East Village stuff. You know what I mean? That was on the Son of Sam.
That definitely was an area that. I think everybody, when you go there, you have at least one sort of strange experience. You walk past some place and you realize that it's a place that you've read about. You weren't consciously seeking it out, but there it is. And you realize you're standing next to it. And it just, because there's so many places like that in New York. But mine was the place where William Burroughs used to live. I knew it was down there. That wasn't really what I was going to see, but all of a sudden it's just right there, and you recognize the gate and the number over the door and everything. And of course, Burroughs, that's a whole other connection to this stuff, and to the magical child and all of that scene.
Well, John, sir, you just signed yourself up for another show here in Operation GCD because it is William Burroughs who institutes the smiley face as a chaos symbol into the neo process movement.
Yeah. Burroughs was something else.
I as always, I salute your efforts and all these things. I learned something new. I did not know these Burroughs connections. I do need to learn more Burroughs stuff. Clearly,
it's spooky. He was involved in some, and he admitted. He said, I had CIA acquaintances, which I think is underplaying it a little bit, but at the very least, he knew.
And a Scientologist, John, and a Scientologist.
That's right. Very dedicated Scientologist at one point. For
sure.
And that's right, DeLand, Florida. And another thing about DeLand is I believe that's where Burroughs' son, Billy Jr., he died in DeLand or somewhere just outside of DeLand. Strangely enough, just as we're talking about Burroughs. Yeah.
That's wild. I didn't know that. William S. Burroughs Jr.
Yeah, but Billy or Willie Jr. Yeah.
Dies William number 3 dies March 3rd, 1981. Survey says DeLand, Florida.
Am I okay? Yeah. He was a very good writer in his own right, and to his credit, ultimately, I believe, although it caused him a lot of pain in his life, he was not a part of his father's circle. He was very much outside that and was frustrated and didn't understand all the weird, that weird group of friends and that his father had, all the strange stuff that he was involved with. I think a lot of that was a mystery to Billy. He's one of my favorite writers. I have a real soft spot for Billy because he had a rough life.
He did die at 33, though.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Y'all both are blowing my brain hole here, and I don't want to. You're making some great points, and I don't want to direct you from them, but I do have to get us back on track here with the Chowder Society.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and synopsize the rest of the.
No, I assure you, you'll both be receiving emails from me tonight with these various notes of things that come back in the future with an invite. So I do appreciate your time and for blowing my brain hole. I just like to try to keep this narrative going because you all just made so many comments that I bit my tongue on, and we'll stay the path here, and we'll definitely be doing these in the future though. These other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next thing we see is Don there getting engaged to Alma, huh?
That's right. Yeah. That's probably my favorite part of the movie is when he starts to realize that something's wrong with her. It's really creepy. There's very little dialogue, but she's acting so weird, and they keep flashing back to the looks on his face, and he's just it's that I really like that part. He knows.
And I said Don. I meant David. So Don called David to learn that his horror had become engaged to Alma. So Don then shows the 3 elders, right? An old photograph.
Yeah. He shows them a photo, and they say, "Oh my God, that's Eva. We remember Eva." So yeah.
So we have three old Muppets at this point, right? Because Don's dad's dead.
That's right. He's the one that jumped off the bridge.
Yep. Don's brother's dead because he was banging Alma.
Right.
We saw his dick at the beginning of the film.
Right. That's David.
Unfortunately. Yeah. I'm just reiterating that so folks who go watch this film can expect if they want to watch it, that's up to them. At least it's not
that was the scariest part of the movie.
Yeah. Dude, I only jumped at one part, and that was that part. Like, there was no other jump scares involved in this thing. I was like, what the fuck? Why are you guys doing this to me, man? I didn't see it coming.
It's an unflattering shot for any actor, I think.
Because
bad. Yeah.
They didn't even
Bob level of inappropriate.
They didn't even slap it around and get it kind of half chub or something like. No, it was full on baby dick.
It looks very awkward. Yeah. I mean, it must have been an awkward day on set.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when there's probably a lot of awkward days on a lot of sets, you know what I mean?
His bird and his bush on the first day of filming.
So the next day we lose our next Muppet.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's Dr. Jaffrey. Yeah.
Yeah. And he dies of a heart attack, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then after that, then the 2 remaining Muppets, Fred Astaire and the other guy, the Ricky and Sears, right? Houseman and Fred Astaire, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They kind of bring Ricky in on the scene, or I'm sorry, Don in on the scene at that point, right?
Yeah, they explain to him just like in the book to everything that happened. In the book, when it's just the two of them left, they're sitting in Edward's house, and they're saying, we're going to explain to you what happened and what the history of this is, and we're not proud of it, but we killed this woman and we didn't mean to.
Yep.
So yeah.
And that's when we see the scene. Then that they flashes back to when they were dancing, right?
That's right. That's right.
It says after the four were, that's not it. After the four went home and became drunk, they returned to the house. This is the dilapidated house that we see in the future. Actually, we skipped over that part, and I apologize. So back when Don first hits town, Fred Astaire, Mr. Ricky there, right? He goes over to that old murder scene, right? What happens there in the old scene? So I think that's a very interesting dynamic that obviously plays a very important role later in the film, but is interesting in this kind of esoteric understanding as well.
Yeah. Well, he sees Gregory and Finney. Their roles in the film are a little murky. There's not any real reason for them to be in the film other than to just add another horrific layer to the story. But they're major characters via flashback in the novel. But yeah, Gregory Bate, whose character name is from Gregory Bateson,
that's what I was going to say, dude.
Yeah, influenced R.D. Laing. Yeah. And Finney is his developmentally disabled brother, the little boy. And you see them here and there throughout the film whenever something odd happens. But their roles in the film are much diminished compared to what they do in the book. But yeah.
Well, the one thing I did pick up on there was, especially after Fred Astaire gets chased out of there by them, you hear Alma's voice and them go into the room like she's got some sort of mind control spell on them.
That's right. She laughs and she says, "I've got something for you to do," or something to that effect. Yeah. And the police dispatch, the guy on the dispatch phone tells the sheriff, well, we've got this weird guy in town, Gregory Bate. He was involved in some cult or something back on the West Coast, and he got out of an asylum or something, and he's here in Milburn now. And so there is that verbal tie to all the cult stuff in the movie.
So 2 questions. One, I just forgot while I was asking you that. And secondly, I forgot the second one. So I will get back to you. You just made some good points about Bateson, and they were both relative to Bateson, whatever it was. It'll circle back here in a second.
Sure. Yeah.
No, because Bateson's an interesting character, right? Within this kind of he didn't work for the Tavistock, but within this kind of mind control Tavistokian,
he was very
planning how we're going to do this to society, right? Like he's integral in that process.
He had some odd concepts, and he was a huge influence on R.D. Laing. Yeah.
Not the comedian.
No.
So did the mill burn? Was that any nod to Milgram?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. It may have been.
The Milgram experiment.
I think yeah, and that's a good point. It may have been that. There's so many things that I would have asked Peter Straub if I could have asked him, and sat down with him and said, like,
sure,
wow, man, you really packed the references into this one book. It's incredible,
real hardcore.
Yeah.
This may have been his opus. I don't know about. I'm not 100 on that, JJ.
The Milgrams, when they were convincing folks to shock, they thought they were getting deadly levels of shock therapy, but really they were just an actor holding the things like they were getting shocked, and the person didn't know the whole thing was an experiment, but they realized that they could get other people to kill people because they were being told to do so.
Oh shit!
Yeah. Granted, on paper, at least allegedly, they weren't really killing folks. There was no actual electric shock being applied. The person who was applying electric shock was the subject of the test to see how much they could get them to do by just telling them to do more. Yeah, even though everything said that person was going to die, and they would remind the person's going to die, I'm just going to do it anyway, because there was a bifurcation of liability, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's really easy to get people to tell people to die and kill people, apparently.
Well, I mean, this is a psychological operation.
Well, that's what I mean. So this guy, that's what I'm saying. So if we're doing Bates and stuff, right, why would Milburn not be a nod to Milgram, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
those were the thoughts that circle back in my brain hole there. I appreciate you all standing by for that one. But So the next thing we see after we see the 3 out of the 4 dance with Eva, she hits her head. They put her in the car. They send her in the pond, but she's alive when she goes in that pond. So that's to me that's very indicative of a ritual human sacrifice in water.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's a siren.
There you go again with the siren stuff. That's
The
a great
water
point.
reference.
I wasn't even considering that the first time I saw it with the siren stuff. But that's even it brings it all right into the same conversation.
And it's like she draws her power from the water because water is a conduit for energy, right?
Yeah, that's right. So they call him Gregory Bate, which I was like, wait a second, that's a little too on the nose. Gregory Bateson.
Yeah.
So then we go back to present day, right? And then that's when these fellas start, after they flash back to yesteryear and remember the time they killed that lady. And they're like, wait a second, that lady's the new lady. What's going on here?
Right. And then you have a long flashback scene with the young versions of all the members of the Chowder Society, and we see how they meet Eva at like a summertime, some sort of social gathering, and then she's at a tea or a dance or something, and they all become fascinated with her. But it's Ned who's the best looking of the bunch, and it's Ned that he and Eva are attracted to each other. And so they're all out doing this almost kind of like surreal, like they're running through an orchard and then they're on a canoe and odd, 1920s
dreamscape like, right?
Everybody's wearing those boater hats and but yeah, that's an interesting series of scenes too. But yeah, they wind up killing Eva accidentally, or they think they've killed her as we described, but then they see as they're pushing the car into the pond that she's still alive.
She's alive.
Jumps into the back window and is banging on the window and screaming.
They put in zero effort to dive in.
Stand there and watch.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at. I was like, oh wait, she's alive.
One of them's and drooling and punching
it's
the
like
ground.
they just looked at each other and they were like, well, fuck. I guess she's dead.
Right. And that's supposed to be like, look at these horrible spoiled rich kids. Look at what they did when they had a chance to save somebody's life. And they which is in the book is the way they think of themselves all throughout their lives. They think, God, we just killed somebody. We murdered a woman. And then Don tells Sears and Ricky in the book, she never was a woman. There was always something wrong with her. What you did was you just inadvertently caught her off guard. She was already going to kill you, but you just made her angrier than ever. And that's why she's been coming back over and over throughout your lives and
killing your
families and
killing their sons.
Killing their sons, forcing the audience to see their son's dick because they're falling out of building.
Yeah. So
not that I'm obviously upset about that or anything.
We flash back to present time, quote unquote.
That guy flashed something, all right, Julia.
He what?
I said that guy flashed something all right in that scene falling out of the building.
Yeah, his baby asparagus.
What were you saying? The flashback to the present when we see them concluding that Eva and Alma are the same person, right?
Yeah, and then they're like, all right, what are we gonna do? And they decide to drive back to Eva's old boarded up old scary house.
Yeah, where Fred Astaire Ricky got chased out by the goon squad.
Yep.
Yeah. And in the meantime here, Sears, he has left Ricky's house alone to sort of divert attention because he thinks if he can draw the bad guys away from Ricky and Don, that he'll sacrifice himself to do this. So Sears dies when Gregory and Finney magically appear in his car. So they kill Sears in his car out in the snow. And then there's just Ricky and Don left, and they go to Eva's house. And Don hurts his leg. And
falls to the stairs in the old dilapidated structure, huh?
Right.
And then we see them going, and then Ricky suddenly has a. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, the interior of that is really nice. That they convincingly recreate a broken down house from that period. The sets are really nice.
Maybe that's where the 0.5 went. The million for the budget.
Right.
Yeah, that and the matte paintings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we suddenly see after watching all of his friends die that old Ricky here suddenly gets a conscience about himself, huh?
He does, yeah. And while he's going to get help for Don, who can't move because of his injured leg, he gets the idea that, well, maybe if we pull the old car up from the pond, and it's not real clear how he thinks this is going to solve everything, but he wants to make it the 1929 incident right. So he tells the sheriff what he and his friends did to the woman back then, and that they pushed the car into the pond. So they go and they get
the old
crane.
car on the pond routine. He thinks that the woman's not. He thinks the woman is in the car or not in the car.
He thinks somehow if he can dredge up the body and expose the body, that the ghost will leave Don alone.
Yep.
And it's never really clear how that works, but he gets a tow truck and a crane and a winch and everything, and they dredge the pond. And
they call that the old pond out of the old pond, the car out of the pond magic trick. Is what they call it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is kind of an unexpected, that's not where you expect the plot to go, you know. But Don is waiting in the house, and Eva's ghost is right there, and she's reaching out for him, and she's got like a skeleton hand touching his throat, and he's screaming, and so, but just at that moment, they dredge the car up from the pond. Ricky or somebody opens the door, and then out comes Eva's corpse straight at him, and Ricky is going like, no, you know, like you're afraid that's going to kill him since all his other friends are already dead. But the body of Eva collapses right there on the ground, and then suddenly back at Eva's house, her ghost, or the ghost of Alma, whatever she is gone, and Don is safe too.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it was like she needed everybody to know what happened to
right.
her.
Yeah, and just by their dredging up the car and exposing the body, somehow or other, her vengeance,
soul
her
was at peace.
Was satisfied. Right. Yeah. So, so that puts her back at peace again. Yeah.
Which, you know, to a certain extent, I feel like that's kind of these tropes, and that there's some sort of, you know, something attracting, keeping these, you know, this isn't the first time we've seen some sort of priestess of a witchcraft type of deal, sorcery kind of being that's haunting folks until they can get something back from the person, a heart or a lung, maybe maybe a kidney. I'm not sure they're on an organ donor list in the spirit world or what, but they're always after something, right?
Right, like a pound of flesh. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember why I saved this from the film, and I just got distracted because was that it? I'll give you all some closing statements, but I thought it was a great recap of events. But I had saved 2 notes from earlier. I said that were really weird and creepy synchronistic events for me when I was watching this film and reading about stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't remember why I saved this lady. So to give me a second, but I just got distracted because she was married to Roald Dahl. Speaking of diddlers.
Oh, Patricia Neal. Yeah, I almost forgot about
that.
Yeah, she was Ricky's wife. Yeah.
That's right. She was Ricky's wife. Thank you, sir. I knew there was some reason why I saved this.
Yeah. And why can't I think of her name? Stella. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was married to the old diddler Roald Dahl because them schnozberries from Willy Wonka turned out to be dicks and not candy.
Yeah. She was at one point she was Dashiell Hammett's girlfriend too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
When Roald Dahl was telling folks that the snozberries taste like snozberries, according to them kids, he would later describe those snozberries in a later book as dicks.
Ah,
yeah. Roald Dahl is a weird guy. In fact, according to one of Dashiell Hammett's daughters, Hammett warned her, don't get married to him. He's not a good person, or something to that effect. So that's interesting. Yeah.
That is interesting. Well, Kane B, The Purge there. It's my Abbott Costello cohort in Idaho 4 conversations we do over there on his show. And he's going to love this one. So as you can see here, Patricia O'Neill was a member of Phi Beta Pi. The sorority girls up and around that Idaho 4 murder were all Phi Beta Pi. Interestingly enough.
Interesting. Yeah.
And the male victim was Sigma Chi. And in the film, we hear them singing this song, Sweetheart of Sigma Chi.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, that's right. You're singing it down below Eva's window. Yeah.
Yeah. The snozberries fucking do apparently taste like snozberries.
Yeah.
According to these guys, they eat a bunch of dicks if you ask me to believe this is somehow just weird circumstances.
I would not put that past Roald Dahl at all. He apparently was a very peculiar person.
I'm just saying, like, it's just weird. It's just weird to me that in the future, past all of these things, again, I don't want to get into comments of questions of time and concept of time, but it is weird to me how some of these things work, that like you can have such, you know, elements where an actress is a member of the same sorority as these victims and they're singing a song about the other victim and the fraternity he's from. It's just a weird concept of the movie for me to watch. And I was like, what the fuck's going on right now, man?
Oh,
Kill Bill sirens went off in my brain hole is what I'm saying.
I think all of this stuff is absolutely conscious. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense
100.
if it's not, yeah.
Well, what I'm saying about time and magic, it's like, and again, this is a conversation for a different day, but I think part of this, and Peter Levenda, the OTO member, brings this up in his book relative to some of these Son of Sam matters, right? Talking about time and sinister forces and whatnot, and how these magicians impact time in a non-linear fashion. And again, it's a lot of stuff to get into right now, but these are concepts similar to, or relative to this subject via folks like the OTO member, Peter Levenda, right?
Yeah. And these people, they're very serious about what they do. A lot of people think, well, this stuff is silly that they're into, but they take it very, very seriously.
Right. I say
totally
that
agree,
all the time. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. When for example, when people try to suggest to me that the Church of Satan and Anton LaVey was just a carnival barker and it was all a bit, it was all a gambit, and I'm like, all right, dude, well, that's hilarious, but I don't buy it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they want people to think. It's all just a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just agnostic. We just like to LARP as devils and other weird shit.
We're material.
We just like to LARP as devils. You know what it is too? This is something that I always bring up when I cover these type of topics is if they weren't seeing results, why would they keep doing it? They've been doing it forever. And obviously they're getting some kind of result. So you don't have to believe in it, but they do. And obviously it's working for them or they wouldn't do the shit that they're doing.
Yeah. And when I say this nonlinear aspect of time where ideas come from, especially for writers, and again, suggested by Peter Levenda, where I even came up with, started going on this path, not just his ideas, but he's the one who set me on this path. I believe he mentions it in Sinister Forces. There was a book written, I believe, in 1887 called The Titan, which was about an indestructible cruise liner ship that went between Europe and America and suddenly hit an iceberg and sank. Well, that just so happened to occur again later in the future. Real world time is the Titanic. So that's all I'm saying here with these circumstances.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, you get it, and Julie gets something. I was just, at least for the edification of the folks of the interwebs who have missed my, routine and unsolicited tirades on time, then there's part of it one right there. I appreciate both of your all's time tonight. Speaking of time, Julia and John both, and for blowing up my brain hole a number of times, which
Thanks
I just started getting lost in
me.
that cycle for a moment. There are things you suggested to me now I didn't know. I'm like, wait a second, I got to close this show out first before I start doing that. So I appreciate both your all's time.
Yeah, enjoyed
Thanks
it.
for having me.
It's been nice meeting you, having a discussion with you.
Yes, great to meet you, John. I always love talking with people who know what's up.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No, that's all I had, JJ. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'll make sure I connect y'all with the emails, and I'll put your email, Julia, in the show notes for folks to reach out to you, especially Mazish, who I, again, love to hear more thoughts there, ma'am. It's great stuff. I appreciate the input and chat. For all the folks in the interwebs as well, for sure. And if I can offer y'all, I appreciate y'all's review, and again, all the ideas we've shared here tonight. It's great stuff. I'd like to offer y'all both a closing statement, ma'am. Would you like to go first? And anything you'd like to recap or anything you'd like to plug?
I thought this movie was really awesome. John obviously reads the book every October. It sounds like it's just a part of his Halloween ritual thing that he does. I have a similar one. I watch American Horror Story season 1 and 3 every October. Just something I like to do. I think there's a lot of conspiracy stuff within American Horror Story. And so, it's just nice meeting people who know what's up and having a good conversation. JJ, thanks for the invite. John, great to meet you.
Yes.
The chat was on fire tonight. So thanks to everybody in the chat. And that's it for me.
That's awesome. No, thank you, ma'am. And I definitely, one thing I was thinking, and we'll turn it over to John for an answer, but I'd like to get both of y'all back on to discuss Program to Kill after John gets a chance to read it.
Absolutely. I'm down for that anytime.
What do you say, John? You got any closing statements? Welcome. I know I'm sure you're welcome back anytime to talk any of these things, but I'd love to get your input on Program to Kill once you get a chance to read that, and I don't knock over my microphone with a karate chop.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Yeah, I'm going to start reading it tomorrow. So and thank you guys, and I'm just I'm still working on the book. I don't know when that's going to come out, but it's going to be a big one, and it's taking me a long time because I'm doing all the editing and all the drafts myself. So I'm just working on it bit by bit, but it'll be out eventually.
It's good to have a better a product you know you can stand behind rather than one that's timely. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
I want to take some care with it. So I'm still working on that.
Passion project.
Yeah.
No, that's great stuff. And like I said, I'll have all your folks at the interwebs can find Julia's stuff, John's stuff in the links and in the show notes. And I don't have any closing statements myself, other than I greatly appreciate your all's time and conversation, as well as the time and chat of the folks of the interwebs. And tune in for Operation GCD Thursdays on my Patreon. I'll do about a 30-minute preview here on the YouTubes and the other stuff. And then I go over to the Patreon Thursdays and Sundays. But tomorrow is my first, The Anatomy of a Satanic Panic, which, again, largely is going to involve not this guy, not the Muppet version of this guy, but the original version of this guy, Michael Aquino. You know, like I said, PsyOps, I'm not going to be like, well, I'm happy to discuss elements of satanic murders that have existed in and around the Son of Sam situation or the process or any of these other similar murders we've discussed this evening, but I'm really looking at focusing on unpacking the propaganda, the psychological operations, and then comparing these major events that we know of the Son of Sam and stuff, and again showing that these aren't the only, this is not the only example. It's not an outlier, right? There's a lot more of the shit that doesn't even get talked about. For example, you'll see the Presidio board in the background here because he was stationed at the Presidio, associated with the Presidio daycare situation. Is Julia's nodding her head in agreement? She's well aware of what I'm talking about there. Julie, would you believe that's not the only daycare that popped off with that same epidemic and the same problem?
I would believe that 100%. I think right. McMartin, Presidio, I mean, they're just, drops in the bucket, yep. if you could imagine. And just as a closing thought, anyone who has read Program to Kill or they're familiar with McMartin preschool scandal or the Presidio daycare scandal, I just recently saw something saying that the movie with Robin Williams, Mrs. Doubtfire, that character, Mrs. Doubtfire, is based on the preschool teacher at McMartin, down to the exact look, wardrobe, everything. If you look at the McMartin preschool teacher next to Robin Williams as Mrs. Doubtfire, they're spitting images of each other. That's a rabbit hole for the listeners to go and look down.
I'm going to look at it as soon as we get off of here, in fact.
But yeah, that's just a little food for thought.
For sure. No, thank you. And from Presidio to West Point at that same time in the 80s, there was more than one diddling scandal. So that's from coast to coast. It ain't just Presidio. That's my point. We're so, as part of the propaganda and magic show, we're sold these one-off incidents and say, everyone look at this incident. This incident didn't occur anywhere else. It only happened here at the Presidio, within the confines of the Presidio. It only involved Michael Aquino. And I assure you, that ain't the full tale.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, so if folks want to check out more of that business, please check out Operation GCD Thursdays. And on that note, and if any of y'all don't have anything else, I thank you all both for your time and folks of the interwebs.
Thanks a lot. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, well, check your six. Look in that garbage can, because you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.